Chapter 1. The silent tick, the London fog, curled like a living thing outside Hercule Poirot's flat at Whitehaven Mansions, its tendrils pressing against the windows as if eager to invade the sanctuary of order within. It was 7 o'clock. On a November evening in 1925, and Poirot, resplendent in a dove-gray suit with a sapphire teapot, stood before a polished walnut table, arranging a tray of porcelain cups with the precision of a conductor. The air carried the faint aroma of verbena from his tisane, a ritual that steadied his mind for the puzzles that inevitably found him. The clock on the mantel, a sleek ormolu piece, ticked with reassuring regularity, its rhythm a testament to the symmetry Poirot cherished. A sharp rap at the door shattered the calm, urgent yet measured, as if the knocker feared to disturb, but could not delay. Georges, Poirot's valet, glided to the door with his usual silent grace, returning with a silver tray bearing a single envelope, its edges slightly curled from dampness. The crest embossed on the wax seal arose entwined. With a clock face caught Poirot's eye, stirring his curiosity. He slit the envelope with a silver letter knife, extracting a sheet of pale blue paper, its handwriting elegant but tremulous. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I write in distress from Grey Manor, St. Albans, Sussex. Our family's grandfather clock, a relic of centuries, stopped abruptly at 11:11 p.m. last night. Within its case, I found a note threatening my life. At 11:11, your time ends. I fear a malevolent hand at work. Please come at once. Your discretion is vital. Yours in desperation. Miss Lavinia Grey. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his little gray cells sparking to life. A stopped clock, a cryptic threat, a spinster in a remote village, the ingredients of a mystery, both delicate and dangerous. Georges, he called, his voice smooth as polished marble. My valise, s'il vous plaît. I depart for Sussex tonight. And send a note to Captain Hastings, though I suspect his bridge game will keep him from this adventure. Georges inclined his head. The 8:30 train to Lewes, sir? Precisement, Poirot replied, sipping his tisane. The fog outside thickened, but within, his resolve sharpened. Grey Manor awaited, its silent clock a challenge he would answer. The train to Lewes carved through the night, its steam hissing like whispered secrets. Poirot sat in a first-class compartment, his cane resting across his knees, the letter from Miss Lavinia open before him. The rose and clock crest intrigued him, a symbol of time and beauty, yet now tied to menace. Why 11:11? The precision suggested intent, not chance. And the note, hidden inside the clock, implied intimacy with the manor's workings. He folded the letter, his mind already tracing the threads of this enigma. At Lewes, a hired car awaited, driven by a grizzled man named Tompkins, whose pipe smoke mingled with the fog. The road to St. Albans wound through Sussex hills, where skeletal trees loomed like sentinels in the mist. Grey Manor emerged, a Georgian edifice of weathered stone, its ivy-clad walls glowing faintly under moonlight. Tall chimneys pierced the fog, and the windows flickered with candlelight, as if the house itself were watching. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was a place where secrets festered. A young man opened the car door, his face pale under a shock of chestnut hair. Monsieur Poirot? I'm Timothy Grey, Miss Lavinia's nephew. She's waiting in the hall. His voice was tight, his hands fidgeting with a pocket watch that he snapped shut abruptly. Merci, Monsieur Timothy, Poirot said, stepping onto the gravel drive. The air was sharp with damp earth and wood smoke, and the manor's oak doors loomed like a portal to another age. Timothy led him into a grand hall, its black and white marble floor gleaming under a chandelier of wrought iron. At the hall's center stood the grandfather clock, a towering oak giant, its face frozen at 11:11, its pendulum still as death. The silence was oppressive, as if the house held its breath. Miss Lavinia Gray descended the staircase, a slight woman in her 60s, her silver hair pinned tightly, her eyes bright with intellect and fear. She wore a lavender gown, its lace, collar trembling as she extended a hand. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming. This clock, it's been in our family for generations, and its silence feels like a curse." Poirot bowed, his gaze sweeping the hall. "Mademoiselle, a clock does not stop of its own will, nor does a threat appear without purpose. Show me this note, and we shall begin." Miss Lavinia led him to a side table, where a folded sheet rested beside a crystal decanter. The note, written in black ink, was stark. "At 11:11, your time ends." Poirot sniffed it, detecting a faint trace of lavender not Miss Lavinia's perfume, but something sharper, like ink or wax. The handwriting was angular, deliberate, as if disguising its author's natural style. He turned to the clock, its carved roses glinting in the candlelight, and opened its case. The pendulum hung motionless, but a faint smear of ink on its brass weight caught his eye, a careless mark, betraying human interference. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his gloved finger tracing the smear. This was no accident. Someone opened this clock, placed the note, and stopped its heart. "Mademoiselle, who has access to this hall?" Miss Lavinia's lips tightened. "Only the household. Myself, Timothy, Mrs. Holt, our housekeeper, and Rose, the maid. Mr. Ward, our lodger, sometimes passes through, but the clock is my domain." Timothy shifted, his pocket watch clicking again. "It's an old legend, monsieur. The clock stopped when my grandfather died, and again when my father passed. Aunt Lavinia thinks it's nonsense, but now—" His voice faltered, his eyes darting to the clock. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Legends are stories, monsieur, but crimes are facts. This ink, this note, they are facts. I must see the household." Miss Lavinia rang a bell, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Beatrice Holt, appeared, a severe woman in black bombazine, her gray eyes like flint. "You sent for—" Miss Lavinia?" Her tone was clipped, her posture rigid. "Yes, Beatrice," Miss Lavinia said. "Monsieur Poirot is here about the clock. Gather the others." The parlor, with its damask curtains and walnut paneling, was a stage for Poirot's first inquiry. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows that danced like specters. The household assembled. Mrs. Holt, her hands folded tightly. Mr. Felix Ward, a lean man with a horologist's loop dangling from his vest, his smile disarming yet guarded. And Rose, the maid, a slight girl with trembling hands clutching her apron. Poirot stood by the fire, his small figure commanding the room, his voice a blend of charm and steel. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed. The clock of Gray Manor has been silenced, and a threat lies against Mademoiselle Lavinia. Who among you knows of this?" Mrs. Holt's eyes narrowed. "I clean the hall daily, monsieur. The clock was ticking its supper. I was in my quarters when it stopped." "Felix?" Ward leaned forward, his fingers tapping his loop. "I'm a guest here, studying clocks for my work. I was in my room, sketching gears. That old piece is a marvel, but I've not touched it." Rose stammered, her cheeks flushing. I dusted the hall yesterday, sir. I saw nothing odd. I swear." Timothy cleared his throat, his watch clicking shut. "I was in the library, reading. Aunt Lavinia found the note after I went to bed." Poirot's gaze lingered on each, noting Mrs. Holt's rigidity, Felix's calculated charm, Rose's fear, and Timothy's nervous tick. "And this legend of the clock stopping before a death, does it weigh on you?" Miss Lavinia's voice was firm. "It's superstition, monsieur. My brother believed it, but I don't. Yet this note—" She shivered, her hand brushing the table. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging details. Merci. I will examine the clock further tomorrow. And the grounds. For now rest, but know that Hercule Poirot sees all. As the household dispersed, Miss Lavinia lingered, her eyes searching his. Monsieur, do you think it's one of them? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mademoiselle, the heart of a house is its people, and their secrets are its pulse. I will find the truth. She nodded, a flicker of relief softening her face, and withdrew. Timothy hesitated, then followed, his watch clicking like a warning. In his guest room, a cozy chamber with velvet drapes and a mahogany bed, Poirot arranged his toiletries with meticulous care, the fog's chill seeping through the window. The clock's silence, the ink-smeared pendulum, the threatening note, these were no mere pranks. The rose crest on the letter suggested a family connection, perhaps to the legend Timothy mentioned. And the household's reactions, Mrs. Holt's coldness, Felix's charm, Rose's fear, Timothy's nerves, each was a clue, a shadow to be illuminated. He opened the window, letting the fog's damp breath curl in, and leaned out, his eyes scanning the darkened grounds. The Manor's silhouette loomed, its chimneys like fingers against the moon. A faint rustle drew his gaze to the garden below. A figure, cloaked in shadow, moved swiftly past the hedge, vanishing into the mist. Poirot's pulse quickened, but pursuit was impossible in the dark. He closed the window, his mind racing. The figure confirmed an outsider's presence, perhaps the author of the note. He retrieved the note from his valise, studying its ink under a lamp. The lavender scent was stronger now. Not perfume, but something chemical, perhaps from a workshop. Felix, the horologist, came to mind, his loupe, his sketches, his access to the hall dot. As Poirot prepared for bed, a soft creak echoed from the hall, sharp and deliberate, like the clock stirring in its sleep. He froze, his hand on the lamp. The sound came again, fainter, as if from within the clock itself. He stepped to the door, peering out, but the hall was empty, the chandelier's light casting long shadows. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to the unseen force. You think to frighten Hercule Poirot? You will find I am not so easily silenced. He returned to his room, placing the note beside his valise, his little gray cells alight with purpose. The creak, the note, the cloaked figure, these were the opening moves in a game he would master. Tomorrow, he would probe the clock's secrets and the grounds where the shadow had fled. The silent tick of Grey Manor had called him, and Poirot would make it speak. Chapter 2. The shadows of Grey Manor. The fog of St. Alden's clung to Grey Manor like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the world beyond its ivy-draped walls. Hercule Poirot awoke at precisely 6 o'clock, his internal clock as reliable as the silent grandfather clock in the hall below. His guest room, with its heavy velvet drapes and mahogany furnishings, was a cocoon of order, yet the memory of last night's creak, the faint, deliberate sound from the clock lingered like a whisper of menace. The note found within the clock. At 11:11, your time ends. And the shadowy figure glimpsed in the garden had set his little gray cells humming. Miss Lavinia Gray's summons had drawn him into a puzzle where time itself seemed an adversary. Poirot dressed with his usual precision, selecting a charcoal suit with a silk waistcoat, his sapphire teepin glinting like a challenge to the mystery. The lavender-scented note, with its chemical undertone, rested in his valise beside his notebook, where he had jotted his initial observations. The ink-smeared pendulum, the cloaked figure, the household's guarded demeanor. Today, he would probe deeper, beginning with the clock and the people who moved around it like moths around a flame. He descended the grand staircase, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the marble floor. The hall was dim, lit only by slivers of morning light piercing the fog through tall windows. A grandfather clock loomed, its rose-carved oak case a silent sentinel. Its hands frozen at 11:11. Poirot paused, his green eyes narrowing as he studied. The clock's face. The smear of ink on the pendulum, noticed last night, was still there. A faint blue smudge that spoke of haste or carelessness. He opened the case, his gloved hands careful not to disturb the mechanism, and examined the gears. A faint scratch on the inner panel caught his eye, a mark too precise for wear, as if a tool had pried it open. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. This clock has been touched, and not by a ghost. The note was placed with purpose, but why stop the time at 11:11? A soft cough interrupted his thoughts. Miss Lavinia Gray stood at the parlor door, her lavender gown replaced by a practical tweed skirt and blouse, her silver hair pinned tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but edged with strain. "You're up early. Have you found anything?" Poirot turned, his smile disarming yet probing. "Mademoiselle, the clock speaks, even in its silence. This scratch suggests someone opened it recently, perhaps to hide your note. Tell me, who knows its workings?" "Miss." Lavinia approached, her eyes flicking to the clock. "Only I tend to it, winding it weekly. Timothy sometimes helps, but he's no mechanic. Mr. Ward, our lodger, has studied it. He's a horologist, you know, but I've never seen him touch it without permission." Poirot nodded, filing away the mention of Felix Ward. The horologist's presence, with his loop and sketches, was a thread to tug. "And this legend of the clock stopping before a death, does it name a specific hour?" Miss Lavinia's lips tightened. "No, just that it stops. My brother Roger believed it was a warning tied to our family's fortune. He was a clockmaker, you see, and built a vault somewhere in the manor, locked with a mechanism only he understood. But he died before sharing its secret." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A vault, you say? And this fortune, what form does it take?" "Jewels, papers, perhaps gold," she replied, her voice low. "Roger was secretive, but he hinted at wealth. Hidden for my protection. I thought it a tale, until now." Before Poirot could press further, Timothy Gray entered, his chestnut hair disheveled, his pocket watch clicking as he snapped it shut. "Aunt Lavinia, you shouldn't tire yourself," he said, his tone protective but sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, any progress?" Poirot's gaze lingered on Timothy's watch, its ticking a stark contrast to the silent clock. "Monsieur, progress is made by observation. You were in the library when the clock stopped, oui? Did you hear anything unusual?" Timothy's fingers tightened on the watch. "Nothing, just the wind. I was reading Poe fitting, I suppose, for this gloom." Poirot smiled thinly. "The wind, or perhaps a shadow. I saw a figure in the garden last night. Have you seen such a one?" Timothy's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. "No, monsieur. This manor's full of creaks and shadows. You'll drive yourself mad chasing them." Miss Lavinia touched Poirot's arm. "Let's breakfast, monsieur. The household will join us, and you can ask your questions." The dining room was a study in faded grandeur, its long table set with silver and china, the walls adorned with portraits of stern gray ancestors. A chandelier dripped crystal, catching the weak morning light. Poirot sat opposite Miss Lavinia, with Timothy at her side. Mrs. Beatrice Holt, the housekeeper, entered, her black bombazine dress rustling like dry leaves, followed by Felix Ward, his horologist's loop glinting on his vest, and Rose, the maid, who carried a tray of scones with trembling hands. Poirot sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the group. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a velvet blade, "the clock's silence is no accident, nor is the threat to Mademoiselle Lavinia. I seek the truth. Who was in the hall at 11:11 last night?" Mrs. Holt's gray eyes met his, unyielding. "I was in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's menu." The clock was ticking when I passed it at 10. Felix leaned back, his smile easy but calculated. I was in my room, adjusting a pocket watch. That old grandfather's a beauty Swiss gears. I'd wager, but I didn't touch it. Rose's voice was barely audible. I was polishing silver in the pantry, sir. I heard the clock stop, but I didn't go near it. Timothy's watch clicked again, drawing Poirot's gaze. I told you I was in the library. Aunt Lavinia found the note after I'd gone to bed. Poirot's mustache curled slightly. And yet someone opened the clock, placed a note, and stopped its heart. Mademoiselle Rose, you heard it stop? Did you hear footsteps, perhaps? Rose's cheeks flushed, her hands twisting her apron. I thought I heard a creak, sir, like someone moving fast. But the pantry's far from the hall, and I was scared to look. Merci, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. Fear sharpens the senses, mademoiselle. Your ears may yet help us. Miss Lavinia set down her cup, her voice sharp. Monsieur Poirot, this talk of vaults and legends, do you think it's connected? Poirot nodded. The clock is the key, mademoiselle, perhaps to this vault your brother built. Its silence is a signal, and the note a warning. I must examine it closely. After breakfast, Poirot returned to the hall, his magnifying glass in hand. The clock's case was a masterpiece, its oak carved with roses and vines, its face inlaid with mother-of-pearl. He opened it again, inspecting the gears. With care. The scratch on the inner panel was deeper than he'd thought, and beside it, a faint ridge suggested a hidden compartment. He pressed gently, and a small panel clicked open, revealing a brass key, its head etched with a rose matching the crest on Miss Lavinia's letter. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed, pocketing the key. The clock hides more than threats. This key, what does it unlock? Miss Lavinia, who had followed him, gasped. That's Roger's work. He made keys like that for his inventions. Could it open the vault? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, mademoiselle, but first I must know more of this vault. Where is it? She shook her head. Roger never told me. He said it was safe, hidden where only the clock could point. I thought it a fancy, but now. Timothy joined them, his face pale. Aunt, you never mentioned a key. Father was always tinkering with that clock. He said it held the family's future. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you, monsieur? Did you tinker with it? Timothy flushed. No, I'm no clockmaker. I just wind it when Aunt asks. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the key, the scratch, the ink smear, and Rose's creak. The household's denials were too uniform, their nerves too raw. And the cloaked figure, had they returned? He resolved to inspect the grounds later, but first, the clock demanded his focus. The afternoon brought a break in the fog, revealing St. Alden's rolling hills and the manor's sprawling gardens. Poirot, however, remained in the hall, his tools laid out like a surgeon's kit. He examined the clock's mechanism with Felix Ward, who had offered his expertise, his loupe glinting as he peered at the gears. It's a fine piece. Monsieur Poirot, Felix said, his voice warm but guarded. Swiss, 18th century, with a double escapement. Stopping it at 11:11 took skill. Someone knew how to halt the pendulum without breaking it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you, monsieur, have such skill? Felix's smile faltered. I study clocks, not sabotage them. I was sketching last night, as I said. Poirot produced the key, watching Felix's reaction. This was hidden. In a compartment. Do you recognize it? Felix's fingers twitched, but he shook his head. No, but it's fine work. Roger Gray's, I guess. He was a genius with locks. Poirot pocketed the key, unconvinced. Felix's knowledge was too precise, his demeanor too smooth. He dismissed the horologist, turning back to the clock. The compartment's discovery was a breakthrough, but the key's purpose remained elusive. He closed the case, his mind turning to the grounds where the cloaked figure had vanished. As evening fell, Poirot donned his overcoat and stepped into the garden, the air sharp with frost. The hedges were trimmed to geometric precision, but a patch near the gate was disturbed. Branches snapped as if by hurried passage. He knelt, his magnifying glass revealing a single thread caught on a thorn-gray wool, coarse, unlike the manor's finery. The gate itself was locked, but a scuff mark on the iron suggested someone had climbed over. Interesting, Poirot murmured, pocketing the thread. The figure had been here, perhaps watching the hall when the clock stopped. He returned to the manor, his thoughts on the vault. Miss Lavinia awaited him in the parlor, her face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I found something in Roger's old study. A journal mentioning the clock, and a rose lock. Could it be the vault?" Poirot's pulse quickened. "Show me, mademoiselle." The study was a cramped room, its shelves stuffed with clockmaking manuals and sketches. The journal, leather-bound and yellowed, lay open on a desk. Poirot read a passage. "The rose lock guards our fortune, tied to the clock's heart. At 11:11 it speaks." The words confirmed the key's importance, but the vault's location remained a mystery. "This is most helpful," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "The clock and the key are linked to your brother's secret. I will find this vault, and the one who threatens you." Miss Lavinia's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you, monsieur. I feel safer with you here." As Poirot prepared to retire, a gust of wind rattled the windows, followed by a faint creak from the hall knock. The clock, but sharper, like a floorboard under weight. He stepped to the door, peering out, but saw only shadows. The manor was alive with secrets, and the cloaked figure, the key, the journal all pointed to a deeper game. "Mon ami," Poirot whispered to the darkness. "You hide, but Hercule Poirot sees. The shadows of Grey Manor will not keep you long." He returned to his room, the key and thread joining the note in his valise. The clock's silence was a challenge, the threat a gauntlet thrown. Tomorrow he would search the grounds and probe the household further, but for now the discovery of the key and journal marked progress. The mystery of the silent tick had deepened, but Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unravel its heart. Chapter 3. The footprints in the frost. The dawn broke over St. Alban's with a brittle clarity, the fog of the previous night giving way to a frost that crusted the grounds of Grey Manor like a shroud of diamonds. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, rose at 5:30, his breath visible in the chill of his guest room. The discoveries of yesterday, the brass key etched with a rose, the coarse gray thread from the garden, the journal hinting at a rose lock tied to a hidden vault head, sharpened his resolve. A grandfather clock's silence at 11:11, coupled with the threatening note, "At 11:11 your time ends," pointed to a deliberate act, and the cloaked figure glimpsed in the garden suggested an outsider's hand. Poirot's little gray cells hummed, eager to trace the threads of this enigma through the frost-kissed grounds. He dressed with meticulous care, choosing a navy overcoat and a burgundy scarf, his polished shoes gleaming like obsidian. The key rested in his pocket, alongside the note and thread, each a piece of the puzzle. The journal's mention of a vault, guarded by a mechanism linked to the clock, hinted at a fortune Miss Lavinia Gray's brother Roger had concealed. But who sought it, and why threaten Miss Lavinia? The household Timothy Gray, Mrs. Beatrice Holt, Felix Ward, and Rose had offered denials, yet their nerves betrayed secrets. Today, Poirot would follow the cloaked figure's trail, starting. With the garden's disturbed hedge, he descended to the hall, where the grandfather clock stood, its carved roses catching the morning light. The silence was oppressive, the hands still frozen at 11:11. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass hovering over the case. The scratch on the inner panel, noted yesterday, was joined by a faint smudge of wax near the pendulum's base knot candle. Wax, but a harder, yellowish kind, like that used in clock maintenance. "Interesting," he murmured, his mustache twitching. Someone with skill tended this clock, yet left it silent. Miss Lavinia appeared, her tweed coat buttoned against the cold, her eyes bright with determination. "Monsieur Poirot? Yer. Up early again? Any new discoveries?" Poirot turned, his smile measured. "Mademoiselle, the clock whispers even in its stillness. This wax suggests a horologist's touch, perhaps Monsieur Ward's. But first, I must see the garden where I glimpsed the figure last night." Miss Lavinia nodded, her face taut. "The garden's been quiet since Roger's death, but I'll show you. Timothy's still abed. He's not an early riser." They stepped into the grounds, where frost glittered on the manicured hedges and stone paths. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Poirot retraced his steps to the gate where the snapped branches and scuff mark had caught his eye. The frost had preserved a new clue, a trail of footprints, distinct with a crosshatched tread, leading from the gate toward a locked greenhouse at the garden's edge. The prints were deep, suggesting a man of considerable weight, and they veered sharply, as if the walker had hurried. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, kneeling with his magnifying glass. "These are fresh, made after last night's fog lifted. The figure returned, mademoiselle, and these prints lead us to answers." Miss Lavinia's breath caught. The greenhouse Roger used it for his experiments, clock parts and such. "It's been locked since he died?" Poirot examined the greenhouse door, its padlock rusted but intact. The key from the clock didn't fit, but a scratch on the lock's edge mirrored the one on the clock's panel. He produced a small tool from his pocket, a relic of past cases, and probed the lock. It clicked open, revealing a glass-walled interior, thick with dust and overgrown ferns. The air was heavy with mildew, but Poirot's eyes were drawn to a workbench in the corner, strewn with gears and springs. A torn glove lay among them, its leather worn, its cuff embroidered with a single R. "This glove," Poirot said, lifting it with a handkerchief, "is not one of yours, mademoiselle?" Miss Lavinia shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, it's too large. A man's. Roger's, perhaps, but he's been gone 5 years." Poirot sniffed the glove, detecting a faint trace of machine oil, distinct from the lavender of the note. "This belongs to our cloaked figure, perhaps, or another who knows the greenhouse's secrets. We must learn its story." As they searched the workbench, Poirot's fingers brushed a loose floorboard. He pried it up, revealing a small tin box, its lid etched with a rose. Inside was a folded paper, yellowed with age, bearing Roger Gray's handwriting. "The vault lies where the rose blooms, guarded by the clock's heart. Trust no one but Lavinia." A chill ran through Poirot. This was no mere fortune, but a legacy, fraught with danger. "Mademoiselle," he said, pocketing the paper, "your brother hid more than wealth. This vault is the key to our mystery, and the glove suggests someone else seeks it." Miss Lavinia's voice trembled. "Roger always said the clock was special, that it held our family's future. But a vault, where could it be?" Before Poirot could reply, a figure approached Constable Burrows, a stout man with a ruddy face, his uniform dusted with frost. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Lavinia," he said, tipping his hat. "I heard you were investigating. There's talk in the village. A vagrant's been seen near the church, carrying a satchel. Odd fellow, skulking about at night." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A vagrant, you say? With a satchel, perhaps containing tools or a clock part?" "Merci, Monsieur Burrows. I will visit the village, but first we return to the manor." Back in the dining room, the household gathered for luncheon, the tension palpable despite the clink of silver and china. Mrs. Holt served soup with a scowl, her bombazine dress absorbing the light. Felix Ward, his loop tucked into his vest, chatted amiably about clock mechanisms, his eyes flicking to Poirot. Rose hovered by the sideboard, her hands unsteady, while Timothy toyed with his pocket watch, its ticking a nervous pulse. Poirot stood, his voice cutting through the chatter. Mesdames et messieurs, the mystery deepens. Footprints in the frost lead to the greenhouse, where I found this. He held up the glove, watching their faces. And a note from Monsieur Roger Gray speaks of a vault, guarded by the clock. Who among you knows of this place? Mrs. Holt's spoon paused. A vault? Roger's fancies, nothing more. I cleaned his greenhouse years ago. It's just junk. Felix leaned forward, his smile tight. A vault sounds intriguing, but I only know clocks, not secrets. That glove's not mine. I prefer kidskin. Rose gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I saw someone by the greenhouse last week, sir. A man tall, with a hat pulled low. I thought he was a gardener. Timothy's watch clicked shut. Aunt, you never mentioned a vault. Father was always secretive, but I thought it was about his. Clocks. Poirot's gaze lingered on Rose. Mademoiselle, this man, what did he carry? A satchel, sir, she whispered, dark, heavy-looking. He ran when he saw me. Merci, Poirot said, his tone gentle. Your eyes are valuable, mademoiselle. Do not fear to speak. Miss Lavinia set down her napkin, her voice firm. Monsieur Poirot, Roger's note? Does it say where the vault is? Poirot shook his head. Not yet, mademoiselle, but it speaks of a rose and the clock's heart. I will find it. For now, I must visit the village to learn of this vagrant. The village of St. Alden's was a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys trailing smoke into the crisp air. Poirot, accompanied by Constable Burrows, entered the Black Rose Inn, its taproom warm with the scent of ale and peat. The barkeep, a wiry man named Perkins, leaned on the counter, his eyes sharp. You're the detective, eh? Looking for that vagrant? Precisement, Poirot said, his cane tapping the floor. A man with a satchel, seen near the church. What do you? No? Perkins wiped a glass, his voice low. Calls himself Gibbs. Showed up a week ago, asking about Gray Manor. Said he was a tinker, but his hands were too clean. Saw him by the church last night, poking around the crypts. Poirot's pulse quickened. The crypts, you say? And this satchel, what was in it? Didn't see, Perkins replied, but it clinked like metal. He's staying at the old mill edge of the village. Burrows nodded. I'll check the mill, monsieur. Poirot? Gibbs sounds trouble. Merci, Poirot said, slipping Perkins. A shilling. If Gibbs returns, send word to the manor. As they left the inn, Poirot's eyes scanned the churchyard across the square, its gravestones dusted with frost. A glint caught his attention, a brass button half buried in the grass, its surface etched with a rose. He pocketed it, its weight joining the glove, thread, key, and note in his collection. The button's design echoed the clock's carvings. A link to the manor's secrets. Back at Gray Manor, Poirot retired to the parlor, spreading his clues on a table. The glove, the thread, the button all pointed to an outsider, perhaps Gibbs, with access to the grounds. The note from Rogers. Journal, the vault lies where the rose blooms, suggested the greenhouse was more than a relic. He resolved to return there tomorrow, but for now, he needed Miss Lavinia's insight. She joined him, her face pale but resolute. Monsieur Poirot, Miss Gibbs, do you think he's the one who stopped the clock? Perhaps, Poirot said, holding up the button. This was found near the church, mademoiselle. Its rose matches your clock. Tell me, did Roger ever speak of a man named Gibbs? Miss Lavinia frowned. No, but Roger had rivals, other clockmakers who envied his skill. He was secretive, especially about the vault. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The vault is the heart of this, mademoiselle. The clock points to it, and Gibbs seeks it. I will find him. As night fell, Poirot stood by his window, the frost glittering under moonlight. A faint ticking broke the silence. Not the clock, but something closer, in the greenhouse direction. He leaned out, his eyes straining, but saw only shadows. The sound was sharp, mechanical, like a watch left running. Mon ami, he murmured to the unseen foe. You move, but Hercule Poirot follows. He closed the window, the button and note in his hand. The footprints, the glove, the journal's clue, these were progress, a map to the vault and the threatener. Tomorrow he would search the greenhouse again and track Gibbs to the mill. The mystery of the silent clock was unfolding, its shadows parting before his little gray cells. Chapter 4. The ticking greenhouse. The frost of St. Alden's had hardened overnight, transforming the grounds of Grey Manor into a crystalline labyrinth that glittered under a pale morning sun. Hercule Poirot, ever precise, rose at 5, his breath clouding in the chill of his guest room. The discoveries of the previous day, the torn glove with the initial R, the brass button etched with a rose, the coarse gray thread, and Roger Gray's journal note, the vault lies where the rose blooms, guarded by the clock's heart, had sharpened his focus. The grandfather clock, silent at 11:11, with its threatening note. At 11:11, your time ends, pointed to a hidden vault, and the footprints leading to the greenhouse suggested an intruder, possibly the vagrant Gibbs, was closing in. The faint ticking heard last night, emanating from the greenhouse, was a new thread in the tapestry of this mystery, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unravel it. He dressed in a tailored overcoat of midnight blue, his scarf knotted, with care, and tucked the glove, button, thread, and brass key into his pocket. The journal's cryptic words and the greenhouse's secrets beckoned, as did the village lead about Gibbs, the tinker with a suspiciously heavy satchel. The household Miss Lavinia Gray, Timothy Gray, Mrs. Beatrice Holt, Felix Ward, and Rosehead offered guarded responses, their nerves betraying hidden truths. Today, Poirot would return to the greenhouse, where the ticking sound and the glove's discovery promised answers. He descended to the hall, where the grandfather clock loomed, its rose-carved oak case a silent challenge. The morning light revealed a faint scuff on the marble floor near the clock, as if someone had stood there recently, perhaps watching his movements. Poirot's mustache twitched. He was not alone in his vigilance. He stepped into the dining room, where Miss Lavinia awaited, her tweed coat replaced by a woolen shawl, her eyes bright with resolve, despite the strain of the threat. Monsieur Poirot, she said, setting down a teacup, you look purposeful. Have you learned more about the vault? Poirot bowed slightly, his voice smooth as polished stone. Mademoiselle, the greenhouse holds secrets, as does your clock. The ticking I heard last night, it was not the wind, but a mechanism, perhaps linked to your brother's vault. I return there now, with your permission. Miss Lavinia nodded, her fingers tightening on her shawl. Roger spent hours in that greenhouse, tinkering with gears and locks. Be careful, monsieur. The vagrant you mentioned, Gibbs, he frightens me. Before Poirot could reply, Constable Burrows entered, his boots dusted with frost. Monsieur Poirot, I checked the old mill last night. Gibbs was gone, but his room had tools, clock parts, files, even a vial of oil. He's no ordinary tinker. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, Monsieur Burrows. Accompany me to the greenhouse. We shall see what Gibbs left behind. The greenhouse stood at the garden's edge, its glass panes fogged with condensation, its iron frame rusted but defiant. The frost-crusted footprints from yesterday were still visible, their crosshatched tread leading to the door. Poirot unlocked it with his tool, the click echoing in the still air. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decayed leaves, the ferns overgrown and tangled. The workbench, where he had found the glove, was undisturbed, but a faint ticking sharp, insistent came from the far corner, hidden by a curtain of vines. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, parting the vines with his cane. Behind them was a wooden crate, its lid ajar, revealing a pocket watch, its face frozen at 11:11. The watch was wrapped in a cloth stained with machine oil, its surface inscribed with 2RG. Time is truth. The ticking came from the watch itself, its mechanism still active despite its stopped hands. Burroughs whistled softly. "That's no ordinary watch, monsieur. Looks like something a clockmaker would treasure." Poirot lifted the watch with his handkerchief, noting its weight. "This is Roger Gray's, I suspect, and its time matches the clock's. The oil matches the glove's scent. Our intruder was here, perhaps Gibbs, seeking this very object." He examined the crate further, finding a scrap of paper tucked beneath. The cloth, its edges torn. The handwriting was Roger's, distinct from the journal. "The rose opens at 11:11, but only for the worthy." Poirot's pulse quickened. The note confirmed the clock's role in accessing the vault, and the watch was a clue to its mechanism. As he pocketed the paper, Burroughs knelt by the workbench, his fingers brushing a pile of gears. "Look here." Monsieur, a hidden panel. He pressed it, and a small drawer slid open, revealing a sketch of the grandfather clock's gears, annotated with symbols. A rose, a star, and the number 11:11. The sketch was signed R.G., with a note, "For Lavinia, the key to our legacy." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This is Roger's design, a map to the vault's lock. The watch, the key, the sketch, they are pieces of a puzzle only the clock can solve." Before they could search. Further, a shadow moved outside, swift and silent. Poirot stepped to the glass, peering through the fogged panes. A figure tall, cloaked, a hat pulled low darted toward the hedge, a satchel slung over one shoulder. Burroughs lunged for the door, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non, monsieur, let him go. We have what he sought, and he will return." Burroughs frowned. "You're sure it's Gibbs?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice low. "But the satchel clinks, as the barkeep said. We will find him in the village, but first we return to the manor." At Gray Manor, luncheon was a tense affair, the dining room chandelier casting jagged light across the table. Mrs. Holt served cold ham with a scowl, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Felix Ward toyed with his loop, his charm strained, while Rose hovered by the sideboard, her hands trembling. Timothy sat opposite Miss Lavinia, his pocket watch silent for once, his face pale. Poirot stood, holding the pocket watch aloft. "Mesdames et messieurs, the greenhouse has spoken. This watch, found hidden, bears Roger Gray's initials and stops at 11:11, like the clock. A sketch confirms the clock guards a vault, and a note warns of its secrets. Who among you knows of this watch?" Mrs. Holt's voice was sharp. "Roger was always hiding things, watches, keys, nonsense. I cleaned his greenhouse once, found nothing but rust." Felix leaned forward, his eyes on the watch. "A fine piece, likely Roger's own design, but I've never seen it. The gears in that sketch, though double escapement, tricky to manipulate. Roses." Voice was a whisper. I saw Mr. Ward near the greenhouse last week, sir, carrying a box. I thought he was fixing something." Felix's smile froze. "A box of tools, Rose, for my work." "I'm no thief." Timothy's eyes darted to Felix. "Father made that watch, Aunt Lavinia. He showed it to me once, said it was special. But I didn't know about a vault." Poirot's gaze lingered on Felix, noting the faint oil stain on his cuff, matching. The watch's cloth. Monsieur Ward, your knowledge of gears is admirable, but your presence near the greenhouse is curious. Did you seek this watch? Felix's fingers tightened on his loop. I study clocks, monsieur, not steal them. I was sketching in the garden, that's all. Miss Lavinia's voice cut through the tension. Monsieur Poirot, Roger's note does. It say where the vault is? Poirot shook his head. Not yet, mademoiselle, but the clock's heart holds the answer. I must speak with Monsieur Timothy alone. The household dispersed, Felix's eyes lingering on the watch, Rose's hands still trembling. In the library, Timothy faced Poirot, his face drawn. Monsieur, I swear I didn't touch the clock. Father was obsessed with it, said it protected. Something precious. He showed me the watch years ago, said it was for Aunt Lavinia. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. And yet, Missar, you did not mention this watch before. What else did your father say? Timothy hesitated, his fingers brushing his pocket watch. He said the clock was a guardian, that it would only open for the right person at the right time. I thought it was his way of dreaming. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging Timothy's words, the watch, the sketch, and the cloaked figure. Nursey, your father's dreams are our guide. Return to your aunt, and say nothing of this. In the afternoon, Poirot returned to the greenhouse with Burroughs, the ticking sound now silent. The crate was undisturbed, but a fresh scuff mark near the door suggested the figure's return. Poirot examined the sketch again, its symbols rose, star, 1111 pointing to a mechanism within the clock. The vault, he deduced, was not in the greenhouse, but linked to it, perhaps through a hidden passage. As they left, Rose approached, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, I saw something else. That man, the one with the satchel, he was by the church last night talking to Mr. Ward. I hid behind the wall, but I heard them mention the clock. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle, your courage is commendable. What did they say? They spoke of a key, she whispered. Mr. Ward said, the rose key's the only way. I ran before they saw me. Merci, Poirot said, his voice steady. You have given me a vital piece. Stay close to the matter, and fear not. Back in the hall, Poirot studied the clock, the sketch in hand. The rose symbol matched the key's etching, and the star suggested a specific gear. He resolved to confront Felix tomorrow, but for now, the greenhouse's secrets, the watch, the sketch, Rose's testimony were progress. The vault was near, its lock tied to the clock's heart. As night fell, Poirot stood by his window, the frost glowing under moonlight. A shadow moved near the churchyard, a glint of metal catching the light, a satchel perhaps. The ticking had stopped, but the manor's pulse quickened. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to the unseen figure, you seek the rose, but Hercule Poirot holds the key. He closed the window, the watch and sketch joining his collection. The greenhouse had yielded its secrets, and Felix's connection. To Gibbs loomed large. Tomorrow he would pursue the horologist and the vagrant, but for now the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 5. The horologist's secret. The dawn light filtered through the frost-etched windows of Grey Manor, casting a pale glow over the silent grandeur of its hall. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, rose at 5, his mind alight with the clues. Unearthed in the greenhouse, the pocket watch frozen at 11:11, inscribed with 2RG. Time is truth, the oil-stained cloth. The sketch of the grandfather clock's gears, marked with rose, star, and 11:11. And Rose's whispered revelation that Felix Ward had met the vagrant Gibbs, discussing a rose key. The threatening note, at 11:11 your time ends. The brass key with its rose etching, the coarse gray thread, and the rose-etched button formed a constellation of evidence. pointing to a vault hidden by Roger Gray and coveted by an unseen hand. The ticking heard in the greenhouse, now silent, suggested a mechanism tied to the clock's heart, and Felix's connection to Gibbs demanded scrutiny. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed, ready to unravel the horologist's secrets. He dressed with precision, choosing a slate-gray suit and a crimson tie, his cane polished to a gleam. The clues key, thread, button, watch, cloth, sketch rested in his valise, each a piece of the puzzle. The journal note, the vault lies where the rose blooms, guarded by the clock's heart, and Rose's testimony implicated Felix, whose knowledge of gears and presence near the greenhouse were too convenient. Today, Poirot would confront him in the village, where Gibbs's trail awaited at the old mill. Descending to the hall, Poirot paused by the grandfather clock, its rose-carved case a silent sentinel. The scuff mark on the marble floor, noted yesterday, was joined by a faint dusting of ash near the base, as if someone had smoked there in the night. He sniffed it pipe tobacco, acrid and distinct, unlike the lavender-scented note. Curious, he murmured, his mustache twitching. A smoker watches the clock, but who? Miss Lavinia Gray emerged from the parlor, her woolen shawl drawn tight against the morning chill. Her eyes, bright with intellect, were shadowed with worry. Monsieur Poirot, you're up before the larks. Have you made sense of Roger's sketch? Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as velvet. Mademoiselle, the sketch is a map to your brother's vault, and the watch a clue to its lock. But Monsieur Ward's meeting with Gibbs, as Mademoiselle Rose revealed, suggests he knows more than he claims. I go to the village to find him. Miss Lavinia's lips tightened. Felix has been kind, but his interest in the clock always felt too keen. Be cautious, monsieur. The village is small, but its tongues wag. Before Poirot could reply, Timothy Gray appeared, his chestnut hair tousled, his pocket watch silent in his hand. Aunt Lavinia, you shouldn't be out in this cold, he said, his tone sharp with concern. Monsieur Poirot, any news of this Gibbs? Poirot's gaze lingered on Timothy's watch, its silence a contrast to its usual ticking. Monsieur, Gibbs is a shadow, but shadows leave traces. I will find him, and the truth of the rose key. Timothy's eyes flickered, but he nodded. Father's secrets are unraveling, aren't they? I wish he'd told me more. Poirot smiled thinly. Secrets are like clocks, monsieur. They tick until they are opened. I will return by noon. The village of St. Aldens was a patchwork of stone cottages, their roofs dusted with frost, their chimneys trailing wisps of smoke. Poirot, accompanied by Constable Burrows, approached Felix Ward's workshop, a narrow building beside the Black Rose Inn, its windows aglow with lamplight. The sign read Ward's timepieces, and the air carried the faint tick of clocks, a symphony of precision that stirred Poirot's admiration. Inside, Felix stood at a workbench cluttered with gears, springs and delicate tools, his horologist's loupe glinting as he adjusted a mantel clock. His auburn hair was swept back, his smile disarming but strained. Monsieur Poirot, an early visit? Care to see a 17th-century verge escapement? Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting a smudge of machine oil on Felix's cuff, matching the greenhouse. Watch's cloth. Monsieur Ward, I admire precision, but I see truth. This watch. He produced the pocket watch, its 11:11 face gleaming. Found in the greenhouse, inscribed to Roger Gray. And Rose saw you there. Speaking of a rose key with a man, perhaps Gibbs. Explain. Felix's smile faltered, his fingers tightening on a screwdriver. That watch? I've never seen it. As for the greenhouse, I was sketching plants for a clock design, Roses, you know, for inspiration. Rose must be mistaken. Poirot held up the sketch from the greenhouse, its rose and star symbols stark. And this, monsieur? Roger Gray's work, found with the watch. You spoke of gears, yet deny knowledge of this? Felix's eyes darted. To the sketch, then back to Poirot. Roger was a mentor of sorts. I studied his notes, but that sketch isn't mine. As for Gibbs, I've met tinkers in the village, hardly a crime. Burroughs stepped forward, his voice gruff. Gibbs left tools at the mill, clock parts and oil. You're a horologist, Ward. Sounds like your game. Felix's jaw tightened. I repair clocks, constable, not conspire. Roger's designs were brilliant double escapements, hidden locks, but I don't know any Gibbs. Poirot's mustache twitched. Yet your cuff bears oil, like the watch's cloth. And Rose heard you mention the rose key. Speak, monsieur, or the truth will speak for you. Felix hesitated, then sighed, setting down his tool. All right, I knew Roger. He showed me the clock years ago, said it had a secret lock tied to. A vault. He never told me where, only that it needed a special key. I met a tinker last week, yes, asking about Roger's work. He called himself Gibbs, but I didn't trust him. That's all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this tinker, did he carry a satchel? Felix nodded, his voice low. Heavy, clinking. He wanted to know about the clock's gears, but I sent him away. Merci, Poirot said, pocketing the watch. Your truth is partial, monsieur, but useful. Do not leave the village. As they left, Burroughs muttered, He's hiding something. Monsieur, that oil's no coincidence. Indeed, Poirot replied, his mind racing. Felix's admission tied him to Roger and Gibbs, but his denial of the sketch rang false. The workshop held more secrets, and Poirot resolved to search it. Back at Gray Manor, Poirot retreated to the library, its shelves heavy with Roger Gray's clockmaking manuals. He spread the sketch on a table, studying its symbols. Rose, star, 1111. The rose matched the key's etching, the star perhaps a gear's marker. The note, the rose opens at 1111, but only for the worthy, suggested a timed mechanism. But the vault's location remained elusive. Miss Lavinia joined him, her shawl slipping as she leaned over the sketch. Monsieur Poirot, is this Roger's vault? Did Felix know about it? Poirot nodded. Monsieur Ward admits to knowing your brother and his clock, but denies the sketch. Yet his cuff bears oil, and Rose heard him speak of the key. I must search his workshop, but first, tell me, did Roger ever mention a star in his designs? Miss Lavinia frowned, her eyes distant. Once, he said the clock's heart had a star, a gear that turned only for the right key. I thought it poetry, but now, Poirot's pulse quickened. The star is our guide, mademoiselle. The clock's heart will speak, but we must find the vault. As they spoke, Rose entered, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, I found something. In Mr. Ward's room. I was cleaning, and this fell from his desk. She held out a folded letter, sealed with a rose emblem, addressed to F.W. in a sharp, unfamiliar hand. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the text. The rose key is near. Meet me at the church, midnight. Bring the sketch. The signature was a single G. Mon Dieu, he murmured. Gibbs seeks Felix, and the sketch. Mademoiselle Rose, you have done well. Rose's hands trembled. I didn't mean to snoop, sir. I'm scared. Poirot's voice was gentle. Fear not, mademoiselle. You are under my protection. Say nothing of this. He dismissed Rose, turning to Miss Lavinia. This letter confirms Felix's connection to Gibbs. I will launch the church tonight, but first I return to the workshop. The workshop was dim, its air thick with the scent of oil and metal. Burroughs stood guard as Poirot searched, his gloved hands probing Felix's workbench. A hidden drawer, concealed beneath a pile of gears, yielded a leather pouch containing a single gear, its edge engraved with a star. A note inside, in Roger's hand, read, "The star turns at 11:11, opening the rose." Poirot's heart raced. This was the clock's heart, a key to the vault. "Euros," he said, pocketing the gear. "This is the mechanism Felix sought. He knows more than he admits." As they left, a clatter came from the alley behind the workshop. Poirot peered out, seeing a figure cloaked, hat low, darting away, a satchel swinging. Burroughs gave chase, but the figure vanished into the village's maze. "Gibbs," Burroughs panted, returning. "Slippery as an eel." "No matter," Poirot said. "We have the gear, and Felix's secret is exposed." We returned to the manor. At dinner, the household was subdued, the chandelier's light casting long shadows. Felix avoided Poirot's gaze, his loup tucked away. Mrs. Holt served with a scowl. Timothy toyed with his silent watch, and Rose kept her eyes down. Miss Lavinia, beside Poirot, whispered, "Did you find anything?" Poirot nodded, his voice low. "A gear, mademoiselle, and a letter linking Felix to Gibbs. The vault is near, but danger nearer." After dinner, Poirot retired to the parlor, spreading his clues. Key, thread, button, watch, cloth, sketch, gear, letter. The star gear confirmed the clock's roll, and Felix's meeting with Gibbs tonight promised answers. He resolved to watch the church, but for now, the gear's discovery was a triumph. As midnight approached, Poirot stood by his window, the frost glittering under moonlight. A shadow moved near the church, a glint of metal betraying a satchel. The ticking was gone, but the manor's pulse quickened. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, "you seek the star, but Hercule Poirot holds the light." He closed the window, the gear and letter in his valise. The workshop had yielded its secret, and Felix's role was clearer. Tomorrow he would confront the horologist at the church, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 6. The London Correspondent. The morning mist clung to the Sussex hills, veiling Grey Manor in a gossamer shroud as Hercule Poirot prepared for his journey to London. The discoveries in Felix Ward's workshop, the star-etched gear, the letter sealed with a rose emblem demanding a midnight meeting at the church, and the oil-stained cloth linking Felix to the greenhouse watch had tightened the web of the mystery. The grandfather clock, silent at 11:11, with its threatening note, "At 11:11, your time ends," pointed to a hidden vault crafted by Roger Gray, and the vagrant Gibbs, glimpsed with a clinking satchel, was a shadow tied to Felix's secrets. Rose's testimony of Felix discussing the rose key with Gibbs, combined with the journal note, "The vault lies where the rose blooms," guarded by the clock's heart, suggested a conspiracy reaching beyond St. Albans. The letters, signature, a single G, beckoned Poirot to London, where the rose emblem sender awaited. His little gray cells thrummed, eager to trace this new thread. Poirot dressed with his usual precision, selecting a tailored black suit and a silver teepin, shaped like a crescent moon, his cane gleaming in the dawn light. His valise held the clues: the brass key with its rose etching, the coarse gray thread, the rose-etched button, the pocket watch frozen at 11:11, the oil-stained cloth, the clock gear sketch, the star gear, and the letter from G, the pipe tobacco. Ash near the clock, and the fleeting glimpse of Gibbs in the village alley sharpened his focus. Felix's partial confession, admitting to knowing Roger Gray and meeting Gibbs, rang hollow, and the London lead promised to unmask the correspondent behind the rose emblem. He descended to the hall, where the grandfather clock loomed, its rose-carved case a silent challenge. A faint smudge of charcoal on the floor, unnoticed before, caught his eye fresh, as if someone had sketched near the clock in the night. He sniffed it, detecting a hint of turpentine, a scent alien to the manor's polish and wax. "Curious," he murmured, his mustache twitching. An artist, perhaps, or a disguise for our tinker. Miss Lavinia Gray awaited in the dining room, her shawl draped over a high-necked blouse, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "Monsieur Poirot, you're off to London? Will you find this Gibbs?" Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as silk. "Mademoiselle, the letter from G leads me to the city, where the rose emblem sender hides. The vault is near, but so is danger. Have you noticed anyone sketching near the clock?" Miss Lavinia frowned, her fingers tightening on her shawl. "Sketching? No, but Roger used charcoal for his designs, blending them with turpentine for his clock sketches. Could it be?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, mademoiselle. A clock watches all, and I will watch its watchers. I return by evening." Timothy Gray entered, his face drawn, his pocket watch silent in his vest. "Monsieur Poirot, you think Felix is involved? He's been kind to Aunt Lavinia, but father's secrets, they weigh on us all." Poirot's gaze lingered on Timothy's pale hands. "Monsieur, secrets are like gears, they turn until exposed. Tell me, did your father ever mention a London contact, perhaps a clockmaker?" Timothy shook his head, his voice low. "No, but he traveled to Clerkenwell often, said it was for supplies. He kept a notebook, but it's gone lost after his death." "Merci," Poirot said, filing away the Clerkenwell lead. "Stay close to your aunt, and observe Monsieur Ward." The train to London sliced through the mist, its rhythm a counterpoint to Poirot's racing thoughts. The rose emblem on the letter suggested a connection to Roger Gray's designs, and Clerkenwell, London's clockmaking heart, was the logical place to start. The letter's text, "The rose key is near. Meet me at the church, midnight. Bring." The sketch implied Gibbs sought the vault's mechanism, and Felix's involvement was deeper than he admitted. Poirot's fingers brushed the star gear in his pocket, its weight a promise of answers dotting Clerkenwell. Poirot navigated the cobbled streets, where the air hummed with the tick of clocks and the clang of workshops. He found Elton's Time Works, a narrow shop with a sign bearing a rose and clock, matching the letter's seal. Inside, Mr. Elton, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, polished a brass chronometer, his eyes darting as Poirot entered. "Monsieur." "Elton," Poirot said, his voice a velvet blade. "I am Hercule Poirot, investigating a matter from St. Alden's. This letter," he produced the rose-sealed note. "You sent it to Felix Ward. Why?" Elton's hands froze, his face paling. I meant no harm, monsieur. Felix asked about Roger Gray's designs years ago. I sent the letter to warn him. Someone's been asking about the rose key. Man named Roland Gibbs. He's trouble. Came here last week, demanding Roger's old notes." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And these notes, what did they contain?" Elton hesitated, then crossed to a safe, extracting a ledger. Roger was my friend. He designed a lock for a vault, tied to a clock's gear, a star gear, he called it. Gibbs wanted it, offered money, but I refused. He's not ripe, monsieur, his eyes. Too sharp, like he'd kill for it. Poirot opened the ledger, finding a page listing payments to Gibbs for consulting, dated months before Roger's death. A note in Roger's hand read, "Gibbs knows the rose, but not the star." "This Gibbs," Poirot said. "Where is he now?" Elton shook his head. "Gone yesterday. Said he'd be in St. Alden's, at the old mill. He left this." He handed Poirot a crumpled card, its edge torn, bearing an address. 12 Mill Lane, St. Alden's. "Merci," Poirot said, pocketing the card. "And Felix Ward, did he seek these notes?" Elton nodded, his voice low. "Last year he asked about Roger's locks. I showed him a sketch, but nothing more. He's too curious, that one." Before Poirot could press further, A crash echoed. From the shop's back room, he darted through a curtain, Burroughs at his heels, to find a table overturned, papers scattered. A window stood open, its latch broken, and a torn map lay on the floor, showing Grey Manor's grounds with a red X. Near the cellar, Poirot retrieved it, his pulse quickening. Gibbs, or his ally, he murmured, may seek the vault's entrance. Burroughs cursed. He was here, monsieur. Slipped out like a ghost. No ghost, Poirot said, but a man in haste. We returned to St. Alden's. The train back was a blur, Poirot's mind dissecting the ledger, the card, and the map. The red X marked a cellar entrance, suggesting the vault's location. Gibbs's payments and Roger's note. Gibbs knows the rose, but not the star, confirmed his role. But Felix's curiosity and the turpentine-scented charcoal hinted at another player. At St. Alden's, Poirot and Burroughs headed to the old mill, a crumbling structure by a sluggish stream, its windows dark. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. Gibbs's room was sparse, a cot, a lantern, and a workbench littered with clock parts. A vial of turpentine sat among them, its scent matching the charcoal smudge. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Gibbs is no mere tinker, Burroughs. He works with precision, and this turpentine links him to the clock. Burroughs lifted a satchel from under the cot, its contents clinking. Inside were files, a chisel, and a notebook, with sketches of the grandfather clock, annotated with roselock. 11:11. A loose page read, Elton hides the truth. Find the star. Poirot pocketed the notebook, his mind racing. Gibbs sought the star gear, and Felix's meeting suggested collusion. As they left, a villager approached, breathless. Monsieur Poirot, Perkins from the inn, says Gibbs was at the church an hour ago, arguing with a man red hair, like Mr. Ward. Poirot's pulse quickened. Mercy, Burroughs to the church. The churchyard was silent, its gravestones stark against the dusk. Poirot found a cigarette stub near the crypt gate, its brand foreign, unlike Felix's pipe tobacco. Gibbs was here, he said, but Felix eludes us. Back at Grey Manor, Poirot joined Miss Lavinia in the parlor, spreading the map and notebook. Mademoiselle, Gibbs seeks the vault, and this map marks your cellar. Felix met him, and Elton in London confirms their connection to Roger's designs. The star gear is the key, but Gibbs is close. Miss Lavinia's hands trembled. The cellar? Roger stored tools there, but I never thought. Is the vault beneath us? Perhaps, Poirot said. Tomorrow we search it. For now, lock your doors. As he retired, a faint rumble echoed from below, not the ticking of the greenhouse, but deeper, like stone shifting. Poirot paused, his hand on the banister. Mon ami, he murmured to the unseen force. You dig, but Hercule Poirot watches. He closed his door, the map and notebook joining his clues. The London trip had unmasked Gibbs's motive and Felix's duplicity, bringing the vault closer. Tomorrow, the cellar awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step nearer to resolution. Chapter 7. The tunnel beneath the dawn over St. Alden's carried a biting chill. The frost on Grey Manor's grounds glinting like a field of shattered glass under a weak November sun. Hercule Poirot rose at 5, his mind a whirl of clues from his London excursion, the rose-sealed letter to Felix Ward, the ledger revealing Roland Gibbs's payments, the torn map marking the manor's cellar, and the notebook with sketches of the grandfather clock's rose lock. The silent clock, frozen at 11:11 with its threatening note. At 11:11, your time ends, pointed to a vault crafted by Roger Gray, and the faint rumble heard last night from beneath the manor suggested a hidden passage. The brass key with its rose-etching, the coarse gray thread, the rose-etched button, the pocket watch, the oil-stained cloth, the star gear. and the turpentine-scented charcoal formed a constellation of evidence, with Gibbs and Felix at its heart. Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, eager to explore the cellar and unravel the tunnel's secrets. He dressed with meticulous care, selecting a charcoal overcoat and a violet tie, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues, each a piece of the puzzle: the key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter, ledger page, map, and Gibbs's notebook. The rumble, distinct from the greenhouse's ticking, hinted at a subterranean mechanism and Felix's meeting. With Gibbs at the church, coupled with the London shop's revelations, suggested a conspiracy to seize the vault. Today, Poirot would descend into the cellar, guided by the map's red X, to find the vault and its guardian, the clock's heart out in the hall. The grandfather clock stood silent, its rose-carved case a monument to Roger Gray's ingenuity. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint chip in the oak near the base, as if struck by a tool in haste. The chip was fresh, its edges unweathered, and a trace of damp earth clung to its cellar soil, perhaps. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mustache twitching. The clock guards the way, and someone has been below. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her shawl wrapped tightly, her eyes sharp despite the strain of the threat. "Monsieur Poirot, you're up with the dawn again. Did London bring answers?" Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Mademoiselle, London revealed Gibbs's greed and Felix's duplicity. This map," he produced the torn paper with its red X, "marks your cellar as the vault's entrance. The rumble I heard last night confirms it. We descend today." Miss Lavinia's breath caught. "The cellar? Roger stored tools there, but I never thought. Could the vault be so close?" Before Poirot could reply, Constable Burrows entered, his face ruddy from the cold. "Monsieur Poirot, I checked the church last night. No sign of Gibbs or Ward, but the crypt gate was unlocked. Someone's been poking about." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting, Monsieur Burrows. The crypt may be a decoy, but the cellar calls us. Come, we explore now." The cellar door, tucked behind the kitchen, was heavy oak, its hinges creaking as Burrows forced it open. A stone staircase descended into darkness, the air thick with damp and the scent of old iron. Poirot lit a lantern, its glow revealing barrels, crates, and shelves of rusted tools, Roger Gray's relics. The map's red X pointed to the far wall, where a stack of crates hit a stone slab, its edges worn but deliberate, as if designed to move. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, tracing the slab's outline. "This is no ordinary wall." He pressed gently, and a low grind echoed, revealing a narrow tunnel, its walls damp and moss-slicked. The air was colder, carrying a faint metallic tang, and the lantern's light flickered on rough-hewn stone. Burrows whistled. "A secret passage, monsieur. Roger. Gray was a crafty one." Poirot nodded, his cane tapping the floor. "The vault lies within, guarded by the clock's heart. Follow, but tread lightly." The tunnel sloped downward, its walls narrowing until they brushed Poirot's shoulders. After 50 paces, it opened into a small chamber, its center dominated by a rusted lockbox bolted to the floor. The box's lid was etched with a rose, matching the brass key. Poirot inserted the key, but it didn't turn. Instead, a faint click revealed a hidden panel, exposing a folded note in Roger's hand. 11:11. The rose opens, but the star must turn first. Poirot's pulse quickened. The star gear, from Felix's workshop, it is the key to this lock. The clock above controls this vault. Burrows knelt, examining the box. "Look here, mousy scratches, fresh ones." Someone tried to force it. Poirot's magnifying glass confirmed it. The scratches were sharp, made with a chisel like those in Gibbs's satchel. "Gibbs was here," he murmured, "but he, Lacks the star gear. We are ahead for now. As they searched the chamber, a soft rustle came from the tunnel's entrance. Poirot spun, lantern raised, to see Rose, the maid, her face pale, her apron twisted in her hands. "Monsieur Poirot, I followed you. I heard noises down here last night, after you returned." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle." "Rose, your courage is admirable, but dangerous." "What did you hear?" Rose's eyes darted to the lockbox. Creaking, like stone moving, and voices. "I think it was Mr. Timothy, talking to someone about the vault. I hid, but I heard him say, 'It's in the clock, not here.'" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Timothy, you say? And the other voice?" "Low, rough like the man with the satchel," she whispered. "I'm sorry, sir. I was scared to tell you." "Merci," Poirot said, guiding her back to the tunnel. "You have done well. Stay with Mademoiselle Lavinia, and speak of this to no one." Burroughs frowned as Rose retreated. "Timothy's in deep, monsieur." "Plotting with Gibbs?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, pocketing the note. "But the clock is the key, and Timothy knows more than he admits. We return above." In the dining room, luncheon was a strained affair, the chandelier's light casting stark shadows. Mrs. Holt served with her usual scowl, her eyes avoiding the lockbox note Poirot kept hidden. Felix Ward toyed with his loupe, his smile tight, while Timothy's hands were steady, his watch silent. Rose hovered, her gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot stood, his voice cutting through the silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, the cellar has spoken. A tunnel leads to a lockbox, marked with a rose, and this note," he held up the paper, "confirms the clock's roll. Someone has tried to force it, and voices were heard below. Who among you knows of this tunnel?" Mrs. Holt's spoon clattered. "A tunnel? Roger's nonsense, nothing more. The cellar's for storage, not secrets." Felix leaned forward, his eyes on the note. "A lockbox?" "Roger was clever. Hidden mechanisms were his art, but I've never been below." Timothy's voice was steady. "I helped Father move crates down there once, but I never saw a tunnel." "You think someone's digging?" Rose's hands trembled, but she remained silent. Poirot's gaze lingered on Timothy. "Monsieur, you were heard in the cellar, speaking of the clock. With whom?" Timothy paled, his fingers brushing his watch. "Heard? I was checking the furnace last night, alone." Rose must be mistaken. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Mistakes are rare with Mademoiselle Rose's ears. We shall see." Miss Lavinia set down her cup, her voice sharp. "Monsieur—" "Poirot, is the vault there? Is it safe?" "The vault is close, mademoiselle," Poirot said, "but guarded by the clock's star gear. I must examine it further." After luncheon, Poirot returned to the hall, the star gear and lockbox note in hand. The clock's chip and earth smudge confirmed the connection to the cellar. He opened the case, comparing the gear to the mechanism. The star symbol matched a slot in the escapement, but it didn't fit yet. "The clock requires more," he murmured. "The rose key, perhaps, or another secret." As evening fell, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the library, showing her the note. "Mademoiselle, the vault is below, but the clock is its gate. Timothy's presence in the cellar suggests he seeks it, perhaps with Gibbs." Miss Lavinia's eyes widened. "Timothy? He's impulsive, but not cruel. Could Gibbs have coerced him?" "Possible," Poirot said. "Tomorrow I confront him, but tonight I watch the clock." As he retired, a faint chime echoed from the hall, not the clock's full toll, but a single sharp note, as if a gear had shifted. Poirot paused, his hand on his door. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you stir, but Hercule Poirot is ready." He closed his door, the lockbox note joining his clues. The tunnel's discovery and Rose's testimony had brought the vault within reach, and Timothy's role loomed large. Tomorrow, the clock would speak, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 8. The clock's coded heart. The morning light pierced the frost-laden windows of Grey Manor, casting a lattice of shadows across the grand hall where the grandfather clock stood, its rose-carved oak case a silent guardian of secrets. Hercule Poirot, rising at 5 with his customary precision, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The discoveries in the cellar tunnel, the rose-etched lockbox, the note, 1111. The rose opens, but the star must turn first, and Rose's revelation of Timothy. Gray's whispered conversation about the clock had brought the hidden vault within reach. The threatening note, at 11:11, your time ends. The brass key, the coarse gray thread, the rose-etched button, the pocket watch, the oil-stained cloth, the star gear, the turpentine-scented charcoal, the cellar map, and Gibbs's notebook formed a complex puzzle, with Felix Ward and Timothy at its edges and Roland Gibbs at its shadowed center. The faint chime heard last night, a single note from the clock, suggested a mechanism stirring, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unlock its coded heart. He dressed in a tailored suit of deep indigo, his silver tepin gleaming like a beacon, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues, each a thread in the tapestry. The key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter, ledger page, map, notebook, and lockbox note. The chipped clock base and the cellar's damp earth pointed to recent intrusion, and Timothy's presence below, overheard by Rose, suggested he knew more than he admitted. Today, Poirot would dismantle the clock with Felix's expertise, seeking the star gear slot and the vault's secret, while probing Timothy's roll docked in the hall. The clock loomed, its hands frozen at 11:11. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint scratch on the clock's face, near the numeral 11, as if a tool had probed it. The scratch was fresh, its edges glinting, and a trace of oil distinct from the turpentine lingered, matching the greenhouse watch's cloth. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mustache twitching. "The clock is touched again, and not by chance." Miss Lavinia Gray appeared, her woolen shawl replaced by a high-collared dress, her eyes alight with determination. "Monsieur Poirot, you're at the clock again. Does it hold the vault?" Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as velvet. "Mademoiselle, the clock is the heart of this mystery. The star gear and your brother's note suggest a mechanism within, linked to the cellar's lockbox. I will open it today with Monsieur Ward's aid." Miss Lavinia's lips tightened. "Felix? After what Rose heard, can we trust him?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Trust is earned, mademoiselle, but knowledge is useful. Felix's skill will serve us, and I will watch him." Before they could continue, Felix Ward entered, his horologist's loop dangling from his vest, his auburn hair neatly combed, but his eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot, you want to tinker with the clock? It's a delicate beast Swiss with a hidden lock, just as Roger designed." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Indeed, monsieur. You know its secrets well. This gear," he produced the star-etched gear, "fits its heart, we? Let us see." Felix hesitated, then nodded. "I'll need my tools." Roger's clocks were puzzles gears within gears. In the hall, Felix set up a table, his tools gleaming, pliers, screwdrivers, a delicate probe. Poirot watched, his eyes noting every move as Felix opened the clock's case. The gears gleamed, a labyrinth of brass and steel, and Felix's loop glinted as he probed the escapement. "Here," he said, pointing to a slot near the pendulum. "This fits your gear, but its lock needs a key to turn." Poirot produced the brass key, its rose etching catching the light. He inserted it into a hidden slot above the slot, and a soft click echoed. The slot opened, revealing a gear engraved with a rose, its teeth aligned with the star symbol. Felix's. Breath caught. That's Roger's work, a double lock, star and rose. It's meant to release something. Poirot turned the star gear, and a panel slid open in the clock's base, exposing a parchment, its edges curled with age. In Roger's hand it read, "To Lavinia, my heir. The vault opens at 11:11, when the star and rose align. Beware betrayal." A small brass plate, etched with a star, lay beside it, its edge worn as if handled often. "Mondi," Poirot said, lifting the parchment. "The clock's heart speaks, and the vault is near. But betrayal, who does Roger warn against?" Felix's. Fingers twitched, his voice low. Roger was paranoid, always talking of rivals. "I saw that plate once, in his workshop, but never this parchment." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You saw much, monsieur, yet say little. This plate, where does it fit?" Felix shook his head. "I don't know. The clock's full of secrets. Roger hid things even from me." Miss Lavinia, watching, gasped. "That's Roger's will, isn't it? He meant to protect me." Poirot nodded. "Oui, mademoiselle. The vault is your legacy, but someone seeks to steal it. We must find its entrance." As Felix closed the clock, Timothy entered, his face pale, his pocket watch silent. "Aunt Lavinia, what's this about a will? Father never mentioned it." Poirot turned, his voice a velvet blade. "Monsieur Timothy, you were heard in the cellar, speaking of the clock. Rose heard you say, 'It's in the clock, not here.' Explain." Timothy's eyes widened, his hands trembling. I was in the cellar, yes, checking the furnace. I spoke to myself, thinking of Father's stories. He said the clock held everything, but I didn't know what." Poirot's mustache twitched. "To yourself or to Gibbs?" "Your voice was heard with another." Timothy flushed, his voice rising. "Gibbs? I don't know him. I was alone, I swear." Before Poirot could press further, Mrs. Holt entered, her bombazine dress rustling, her eyes cold. "Monsieur Poirot, this talk of tunnels and wills is nonsense. The cellar's for storage, nothing more." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting a faint smudge of oil on her sleeve. "Like the clocks. Madame, you dismiss much, yet the clock speaks. We shall see what it reveals." After luncheon, Poirot retreated to the library, spreading the parchment, plate, and clues on a table. The will confirmed Miss Lavinia as the vault's heir, but the warning of betrayal pointed to the household. Timothy's denial rang false, and Mrs. Holt's oil smudge was a new thread. He examined the brass plate, its star matching the gear's design. "The plate is a key," he murmured, "but to what lock?" Miss Lavinia joined him, her face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot, Timothy, he's impulsive, but not a thief. Could Gibbs have misled him?" "Possible," Poirot said, "but his words in the cellar suggest knowledge. I must watch him, and Madame Holt. Her sleeve bears oil, like the clock." Miss Lavinia's eyes widened. "Beatrice? She's been loyal for years, but she disliked Roger's secrets." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Loyalty can mask greed, mademoiselle. The vault is close, but so is danger." As evening fell, Poirot returned to the hall, the clock's chime still echoing in his memory. He tested the brass plate in the gear slot, but it didn't fit. The clock's mechanism was incomplete, requiring another piece, perhaps in the vault. He resolved to confront Timothy tomorrow, but for now, he needed the village dot at the Black. Rose Inn? Poirot questioned Perkins, the barkeep. "Monsieur, this Gibbs, has he been seen today?" Perkins leaned on the counter, his voice low. "Aye, near the church, arguing with a woman tall, stern like Mrs. Holt. They mentioned a vault." then split when they saw me. Poirot's pulse quickened. A woman, you say? Merci. Send word if Gibbs returns. Back at the manor, Poirot found Rose in the kitchen, her hands twisting her apron. Monsieur Poirot, I saw Mrs. Holt by the church last night, after. I heard Timothy. She was with that man, Gibbs, carrying a lantern. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle Rose, your eyes are sharper than a hawk's. This is vital. Stay close to Mademoiselle Lavinia. As he prepared to retire, a faint flicker of light came from the vault's direction, not the cellar but above, near the clock. Poirot paused, his hand on his door. Mon ami, he murmured, you move, but Hercule Poirot sees. He closed his door, the parchment and plate joining his clues. The clock's coded heart had revealed Roger's will, and Mrs. Holt's involvement deepened the mystery. Tomorrow, the vault's entrance awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 9. The vault's silent guard. The frost of St. Alden's clung to Grey Manor's stone walls, glinting like 1,000 tiny eyes under the pale November sun. Hercule Poirot rose at 5, his mind a whirl of clues from the grandfather clocks. Heart. The parchment will naming this Lavinia Gray as heir. The brass plate etched with a star, and the faint oil smudge on Mrs. Beatrice Holt's sleeve, linking her to the clock. The threatening note, at 11:11, your time ends. The rose-etched key, the coarse gray thread, the rose-etched button, the pocket watch frozen at 11:11, the oil-stained cloth, the star gear, the turpentine-scented charcoal, the cellar map, Gibbs's notebook, the lockbox note, 11:11. The rose opens, but the star must turn first. And Rose's testimony of Mrs. Holt meeting Roland Gibbs near the church deepened the mystery. The flicker of light seen last night, near the clock, suggested movement toward the vault, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unlock its silent guard. He dressed with meticulous care, choosing a tailored suit of forest green, his silver tepin catching the dawn's light, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, parchment will, and brass plate. The scratched clock face and Mrs. Holt's meeting with Gibbs pointed to a conspiracy within. The household, with Timothy's cellar whispers and Felix Ward's duplicity as threads in the web. Today, Poirot would open the vault, using the rose key and star gear, and confront the silent guard within. In the hall, the grandfather clock loomed, its rose-carved case a monument to Roger Gray's ingenuity. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint indentation near the clock's base, as if a panel had been pressed. The indentation was subtle, marked with a trace of chalk dust, white and powdery, unlike the cellar's damp earth. Mon, do, he murmured, his mustache twitching. The clock hides another secret, and someone has touched it. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp, her eyes bright with resolve. Monsieur Poirot, you're at the clock again. Does Rogers will lead us to the vault? Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished stone. Mademoiselle, the will confirms your inheritance, and the star gear and rose key will open the vault. The flicker I saw last night suggests movement below. We return to the cellar, to the lockbox. Miss Lavinia's breath caught. So close? But Mrs. Holt Rose saw her with Gibbs. Could she betray us? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Loyalty. Is a mask, mademoiselle? Madame Holt's sleeve bears oil, and her presence at the church is no coincidence. We shall see. Constable Burrows entered, his boots scuffed from the village. Monsieur Poirot, I checked the church again, no Gibbs, but I found this near the crypt. He held out a chalk stick, its tip worn, matching the clock's dust. Looks like someone was marking something. Poirot's pulse quickened. Most interesting, Monsieur Burroughs. This chalk links to the clock. Come, we descend. The cellar door creaked as Burroughs opened it, revealing the stone staircase into darkness. Poirot's lantern cast jagged shadows on the barrels and rusted tools, the air heavy with damp and iron. The tunnel entrance, hidden behind the stone slab, was undisturbed, but a fresh chalk mark, a small star, marred its edge. Poirot traced it, his fingers brushing cold stone. Someone guides us or misleads us, he murmured dot in the tunnel's chamber. The rose-etched lockbox stood, its scratches gleaming in the lantern's light. Poirot inserted the rose key, then the star gear into a slot beside it, as Rogers. Note instructed. A low grind echoed, and the lockbox's lid sprang open, revealing a velvet-lined interior with a cache of jewels, emeralds, rubies, but no sapphire, and a letter in Roger's hand. Lavinia, a sapphire is the key, hidden where the star shines. Holt betrayed me, sold a fake to cover debts. Trust only yourself. Poirot's heart raced. Mon Dieu, the vault is here, but the sapphire is elsewhere. Madame Holt's betrayal is confirmed. Miss Lavinia gasped, clutching her shawl. Beatrice? She's been with us for years. And the sapphire Roger's prize, a star-cut stone. Where is it? Before Poirot could reply, Burroughs knelt, his fingers brushing a seam in the lockbox's base. Look here, Monsieur, hidden. Latch. He pressed it, and a small compartment opened, revealing a second note. Gibbs knows the truth, but not the star's light. The note was crumpled, as if hidden in haste. Poirot pocketed it, his mind racing. Gibbs seeks the sapphire, but the clock holds it. The star's light, perhaps a mechanism within. As they examined the lockbox, a sudden clatter echoed from the tunnel's entrance. Poirot spun, lantern raised, to see Mrs. Holt, her bombazine dress catching the light, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, what are you doing? The cellars know. Place for guests. Poirot's voice was a velvet blade. Madame, we have found the vault, and this letter, he held up Roger's note, accuses you of selling a false sapphire. You met Gibbs at the church. Speak. Mrs. Holt's eyes widened, her hands clenching. I had debts years ago. Roger's sapphire was valuable, so I sold a fake to a dealer, kept the real one safe. I didn't know about the vault, I swear. Poirot's mustache twitched. And Gibbs? Why meet him? Mrs. Holt's voice trembled. He came to me, said he knew about the fake, demanded the real sapphire. I refused, but he threatened to tell Lavinia. Burroughs stepped forward, his voice gruff. You're in deep, Mrs. Holt. Where's the sapphire now? She shook her head, tears welling. I don't know. Roger took it before he died, said it was safe. I never meant harm. Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. Madame, your confession is a start. Return above, and stay where I can see you. As Mrs. Holt retreated, Poirot turned to Miss Lavinia. The sapphire is the vault's true treasure, hidden by the clock's star. We must return to it. In the hall, the clock loomed, its silence oppressive. Poirot examined the base, the chalk-dusted indentation glowing in the lantern's light. He pressed it, and a faint click revealed a hidden slot, too small for the star gear, but perfect for the brass plate. He inserted it, and a soft whir echoed, as if a gear shifted within. The clock's hands twitched, moving to 11:12, then stopped. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The star's light is literal, perhaps a reflection. We need light to reveal the sapphire. Miss Lavinia's eyes widened. Roger loved optics lenses, mirrors. Could the clock have a hidden lens? Before Poirot could reply, Timothy entered, his face drawn. Aunt Lavinia, what's happening? A clock moved, I heard it. Poirot turned, his voice sharp. "Monsieur Timothy, you were heard in the cellar, speaking of the clock. Mrs. Holt has confessed to selling a fake sapphire." "What do you know?" Timothy paled, his hands steady for once. I found Father's notes last year about the sapphire and the clock. I spoke to Gibbs, yes. In the cellar, he offered money for any clues. I refused, but he kept pressing." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the clock?" "You said, 'It's in the clock, not here.'" Timothy flushed. "I meant the sapphire might be in the clock, based on Father's notes." "I wasn't sure." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing Timothy's words. "Merci. Stay with your aunt, and touch nothing." As evening fell, Poirot gathered the household in the parlor, the chandelier casting stark shadows. Felix Ward's loupe glinted, his smile strained, while Rose hovered, her eyes down. Mrs. Holt stood rigid, her confession hanging heavy. Poirot held up the lockbox note. "Mesdames et messieurs, the vault is found, but the sapphire is hidden in the clock, guarded by a star's light. Madame Holt sold a fake, and Gibbs seeks the real one. Who else knows of this?" Felix leaned forward. "A lens in the clock?" "Roger was clever enough for that. I'd love to see it." Rose's voice was a whisper. I saw Gibbs by the stables today, sir, with a lantern, like he was searching." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Merci, mademoiselle. Gibbs is near, and the sapphire nearer." He dismissed the household, turning to Miss Lavinia. "Mademoiselle, tomorrow we light the clock, seeking the star's reflection. For now, lock your doors." As he retired, a sharp crack echoed from the stables. Not the clock's chime, but heavier, like wood splintering. Poirot paused, his hand on his door. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you hunt, but Hercule Poirot is closer." He closed his door, the lockbox note and brass plate joining his clues. The vault's jewels and Mrs. Holt's confession had brought the sapphire within reach, and Gibbs's presence loomed. Tomorrow, the clock's light would shine, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 10. The vagrant's confession. The dawn over St. Aldan's broke with a fragile clarity. A frost on Grey Manor's grounds, shimmering like a veil of secrets under a pale November sun. Hercule Poirot rose at 5, his mind ablaze with why. The clues unearthed in the vault. The cache of jewels missing the star-cut sapphire. Roger Gray's letter accusing Mrs. Beatrice Holt of selling a fake, and the second note, Gibbs knows the truth, but not the star's light, pointing to the grandfather clock as the sapphire's hiding place. The threatening note, "At 11:11, your time ends." The rose-etched key, the coarse gray thread, the rose-etched button, the pocket watch frozen at 11:11, the oil-stained cloth, the star gear, the turpentine-scented charcoal, the cellar map, Gibbs's notebook, the lockbox note, the parchment will, the brass plate, and Rose's sighting of Roland Gibbs near the stables with a lantern tightened the mystery's web. The crack heard last night from the stables, sharp and splintering, suggested Gibbs's desperate search, and Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, ready to confront the vagrant and unravel his confession. Poirot dressed with meticulous care, selecting a tailored suit of midnight blue, his silver teepin glinting like a star, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox, note, will, and brass plate. The chalk-dusted indentation on the clock, and Mrs. Holt's confession of selling a fake sapphire implicated her in the scheme, while Timothy's cellar whispers and Felix Ward's duplicity suggested deeper collusion. Gibbs, seen at the stables, was the key to the sapphire, and Poirot resolved to ambush him there. In the hall, the grandfather clock stood silent, its rose-carved case a monument to Roger Gray's genius. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint smear of grease near the clock's base, distinct from the oil on Mrs. Holt's sleeve, with a hint of lantern fuel. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mustache twitching. Gibbs was here, perhaps last night, seeking the star's light. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp, her eyes shadowed with worry. "Monsieur Poirot, you're up early. The sapphire, do you think it's in the clock?" Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mademoiselle, the clock holds the sapphire, guided by the star's light." Gibbs was seen at the stables, and a crack was heard. "I go there now to find him." Miss Lavinia's breath caught. "Gibbs, so close?" "Be careful, monsieur." Roger's sapphire was his pride star-cut flawless. Before Poirot could reply, Constable Burrows entered, his face ruddy from the cold. "Monsieur Poirot, I checked the stables at Dawnwood splintered on a side door, and there's a fresh footprint, same crosshatch tread as the greenhouse." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most excellent, Monsieur Burrows." "Gibbs is careless. We go to the stables." The stables stood at the manor's edge, their stone walls weathered, their roof sagging under frost. The splintered door hung ajar, its wood freshly broken, and the crosshatch footprints led inside, weaving through straw to a corner piled with crates. Poirot's lantern cast stark shadows, revealing a figure tall, cloaked, a hat pulled low-crouched by a crate, a lantern at his side. The satchel beside him clinked, its leather worn. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a velvet blade. "You are Roland Gibbs, oui? Hercule Poirot has found you." The figure spun, his face gaunt, his eyes sharp with desperation. "Poirot? I'm no criminal, just a tinker, looking for work." Burrows stepped forward, his hand on his truncheon. "A tinker breaking doors? Empty that satchel." Gibbs hesitated, then tipped the satchel, spilling files, a chisel, and a brass pendant etched with RG. Poirot lifted the pendant, its weight familiar, its rose design matching the clock's carvings. "This is Roger Gray's," he said. "Found in the village, perhaps stolen. Why seek the sapphire?" Gibbs's shoulders slumped, his voice low. "All right, I'll talk. I was hired, months ago, by someone who knew Roger's work. They said the sapphire was in the clock, hidden by a star gear. I came to St. Alden's, met word he knew Roger's designs, but wouldn't talk. I tried the vault, the stables, but found nothing." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Hired by whom, monsieur? And this pendant, where did you get it?" "Gibbs's." Eyes darted. "I don't know their name. A letter, signed with a rose, came to the mill. The pendant was in the churchyard, near the crypt. I thought it was a clue." Poirot produced the rose-sealed letter from Felix's workshop. "Like this, perhaps? You met Felix Ward, discussed the rose key." Gibbs nodded, his voice hoarse. "Ward said the key was in the clock, but he wouldn't help. I came here tonight. Thought the stables might hide something." Burrows growled. "You threatened Miss Lavinia, didn't you? That note in the clock." Gibbs shook his head. "No, I never touched the clock. I just wanted the sapphire for the money." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Then who placed the note, monsieur? Someone in the manor, perhaps?" Gibbs shrugged, his face drawn. "I don't know. The letter said to scare her, make her leave, but I didn't do it." "Merci," Poirot said, pocketing the pendant. "Monsieur Burrows, take him to the village. He will stay until I verify his tale." As Burrows led Gibbs away, Poirot searched the crate, finding a torn scrap of cloth, gray and coarse, matching the thread from the garden. "Gibbs was here," he murmured, "but the note's author remains." Back at the manor, luncheon was tense, the chandelier's light casting harsh shadows. Mrs. Holt served with a scowl, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Felix Ward's loop, was tucked away, his smile strained, while Timothy sat rigid, his watch silent. Rose hovered, her hands steady for once. Poirot stood, holding the pendant. Mesdames et messieurs, Gibbs has been found, and this pendant, Roger Gray's, confirms his search for the sapphire. He claims he was hired by a letter with a rose. Seal to scare Mademoiselle Lavinia. Who in this house sent it? Mrs. Holt's voice was sharp. Gibbs is a thief, nothing more. I told you I sold a fake sapphire, but I never hired anyone. Felix leaned forward, his eyes on the pendant. Roger's work, no doubt. But I never sent letters, monsieur. Timothy's voice was low. I met Gibbs, yes, but I didn't hire him. Father's pendant, I thought it was lost. Rose's eyes widened, but she remained silent. Poirot's gaze lingered on each. Someone in this matter knows more. The sapphire is in the clock, and I will find it. Miss Lavinia set down her cup, her voice firm. Monsieur Poirot Gibbs. Said he was hired. Could it be someone outside? Poirot nodded. Possible, mademoiselle, but the rose seal suggests intimacy with your family. I must return to London to trace this letter. After luncheon, Poirot retreated to the library, spreading his clues. Key, thread, button, watch, cloth, ear, letter, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, will, plate, pendant, and cloth. Scrap. The pendant linked Gibbs to the churchyard, and his confession pointed to a mastermind within the manor. The rose-sealed letter, identical to Felix's, suggested a London connection, perhaps tied to Elton's shop. As evening fell, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the parlor. Mademoiselle, Gibbs is detained, but the sapphire remains. The clock's starlight will reveal it, but first I seek the letter's sender in London. Miss Lavinia's eyes softened. Thank you, monsieur. The sapphire was Roger's gift. To me star-cut for my future. Poirot bowed. I will find it, mademoiselle. As he prepared to retire, a letter slid under his door, its rose seal gleaming. He opened it, his pulse quickening. Return the pendant, or the sapphire is lost. Midnight, the church. No signature, but the hand was sharp, like Gibbs's letter. Mon ami, Poirot murmured. You challenge Hercule Poirot, but I am ready. He closed his door, the pendant and letter joining his clues. Gibbs's confession had unmasked the vagrant's role, but the mastermind loomed. Tomorrow, London awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 11. The Star's Hidden Light. The mist of St. Alban's hung heavy over Grey Manor, shrouding its stone walls in a spectral veil as Hercule Poirot prepared for his second journey to London. The vagrant Roland Gibbs's confession in the stables admitting he was hired by an unknown figure with a rose-sealed letter to scare Miss Lavinia Gray had deepened the mystery of the silent grandfather clock, frozen at 11:11 with its threatening note. At 11:11, your time ends. The new letter slipped under Poirot's door last night. Return the pendant, or the sapphire is lost. Midnight, the church, bearing the same rose seal, pointed to a mastermind beyond Gibbs. The rose-edged key, coarse gray thread, rose-edged button, pocket watch, oil-stained cloth, star gear, turpentine-scented charcoal, cellar map, Gibbs's. Notebook, lockbox note, parchment will, brass plate, brass pendant, and stable cloth scrap formed a constellation of clues, with the star-cut sapphire Roger Gray's hidden treasure at its heart. The faint grease smear on the clock and Mrs. Holt's oil-stained sleeve suggested a conspiracy within the manor, and Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, eager to trace the rose seal to London and illuminate the star's hidden light. Dressed with meticulous precision, selecting a tailored suit of charcoal gray, his crescent moon tepid gleaming, his cane a polished beacon of resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter to Felix, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, will, plate, pendant, tablecloth, and the new rose-sealed letter. The chalk-dusted indentation on the clock and the stable's splintered door confirmed Gibbs's desperation. But the new letter's demand for the pendant suggested a deeper player, perhaps linked to Elton's time works in Clerkenwell. Today, Poirot would confront Elton again, seeking the sender, and return to the clock to find the sapphire's hiding place in the hall. The grandfather clock loomed, its rose-carved case a silent guardian. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint smudge of wax near the clock's numeral 11. Not the yellowish wax from Chapter 1, but a clear, glossy kind, like sealing wax. Mon Dieu, he murmured, his mustache twitching. The rose seal was made here, perhaps last. Night. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp, her eyes bright with hope and fear. Monsieur Poirot, you're off to London again? Will you find who sent that letter? Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished marble. Mademoiselle, the rose seal leads to Clerkenwell, where Elton may know the sender. The sapphire is in the clock, hidden by the star's light. I returned by dusk to find it. Miss Lavinia's fingers tightened on her shawl. The sapphire Roger's star-cut gem. Could Timothy know more? He's been so quiet. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Monsieur Timothy's silence speaks, mademoiselle. I will question him on my return. For now, lock your doors. Before he could depart, Rose, the maid, appeared, her apron twisted in her hands. Monsieur Poirot, I saw something last. Night after the stables. A light in the attic, flickering, like someone was searching. Poirot's pulse quickened. Mademoiselle Rose, your eyes are invaluable. Who was in the attic? Rose's voice trembled. I don't know, sir. I was. Too scared to look. But it was after midnight when that letter came. Merci, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. Stay close to Mademoiselle Lavinia, and fear not. The train to London sliced through the mist, its rhythm a counterpoint to Poirot's racing thoughts. The rose-sealed letter, identical. To Felix's, pointed to Elton's shop, where the ledger had revealed Gibbs's payments and Roger's note. Gibbs knows the truth, but not the star's light. The attic light suggested a new search within the manor, perhaps by the letter's sender. In Clerkenwell, Poirot navigated the cobbled streets, the air alive with the tick of clocks, and entered Elton's time works, its rose and clock sign gleaming Mister. Elton stood behind the counter, his ink-stained fingers polishing a pocket watch, his eyes wary as Poirot approached. Monsieur Poirot, back so soon? What now? Poirot produced the new letter, its rose seal stark. Monsieur Elton, this was delivered last night, demanding a pendant linked to Roger Gray. You know the sender, we? Elton's face paled, his hands trembling. I didn't send it, monsieur. But that seal, it's Roger's design. From his private stock. Someone took it from my shop last month, a roll of wax and a stamp. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Who had access, monsieur? Gibbs? Felix Ward? Elton shook his head. Gibbs was here, yes, poking around, but so was a woman tall, stern, like that housekeeper of Gray Manor. She asked about Roger's seals, said it was for a client. Poirot's pulse quickened. Madame Holt, perhaps? When was this? 3 weeks ago, Elton replied, his voice low. She bought wax, said it was for sealing letters. I thought nothing of it. Poirot produced the brass pendant. And this, found by Gibbs. You recognize it? Elton's eyes widened. Rogers, he. Wore it always, said it was a prototype for his locks. I thought it lost when he died. Merci, Poirot said, pocketing the letter. You have been most helpful. If the woman returns, send word." As Poirot left, a shadow moved in the alley beside the shop, a figure, cloaked, hat low, vanishing. Around a corner, Poirot's cane tapped the cobblestones, but pursuit was futile in the maze of Clockenwell. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you watch, but Hercule Poirot sees." Back at St. Alden's, Poirot headed to the manor, the mist thickening as dusk fell. In the hall, he examined the clock, the wax smudge gleaming. He pressed the numeral 11, and a faint click revealed a tiny lens embedded in the clock's face, its surface catching the chandelier's light. A beam flickered, reflecting onto the opposite wall, where a star-shaped indentation appeared, barely visible. "The star's light," Poirot murmured, "a lens to reveal the sapphire." Miss Lavinia joined him, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, you've found something?" Poirot nodded, pointing to the indentation. "The clock's lens projects light, mademoiselle, marking the sapphire's hiding place. We need a stronger beam." Burroughs arrived, carrying a powerful lantern from the village. "This should do, monsieur. Found it at the Inn Perkins. Says Gibbs was asking about lenses yesterday." Poirot positioned the lantern, its beam striking the lens. A sharp star of light hit the wall, illuminating the indentation, which deepened into a slot. He inserted the brass plate, and a panel slid open, revealing a velvet pouch. Inside was a star-cut sapphire, its facets blazing like a captured constellation. Miss Lavinia gasped. "Roger's gem. It's beautiful." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The sapphire, mademoiselle, but the danger remains. The letter demands the pendant, and Madame Holt's role grows clearer." At dinner, the household was subdued, the chandelier's light casting long shadows. Mrs. Holt served with a scowl, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Felix Ward's loup was tucked away, his smile strained, while Timothy sat rigid, his watch silent. Rose hovered, her gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot stood, holding the sapphire. "Mesdames et messieurs, the sapphire is found, hidden by the clock's starlight. But a letter demands the pendant, and Madame Holt met a man in London, buying rose sealed." "Wax, speak, madame." Mrs. Holt's hands trembled, her voice sharp. "I bought wax, yes, for household letters." "I never sent threats, monsieur." Felix leaned forward, his eyes on the sapphire. "A lens in the clock?" Roger was a genius. "But I sent no letters." Timothy's voice was low. "Aunt Lavinia, you have the sapphire father's gift. I knew nothing of letters." Rose's eyes widened, but she remained silent. Poirot's gaze lingered on Mrs. Holt. "Madame, your wax matches the seal. You met Gibbs, and now this letter. Who is your client?" Mrs. Holt flushed, tears welling. "No client, monsieur. I bought the wax to seal old debts, nothing more." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "We shall see. For now, the sapphire is safe." After dinner, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the parlor. "Mademoiselle, the sapphire is yours, but the letter sender remains. I will watch the church tonight for the midnight meeting." Miss Lavinia's eyes softened. "Thank you, monsieur. Roger's legacy is safe, but I fear for you." As he prepared to retire, a soft thud came from the attic, not the stable's crack, but lighter, like a book falling. Poirot paused, his hand on his door. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you search, but Hercule Poirot is near." He closed his door, the sapphire and letter joining his clues. The clock's lens had revealed the gem, and Mrs. Holt's involvement deepened. Tomorrow, the church awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 12. The Midnight Reckoning. The night over St. Alden's was a tapestry of frost and shadow, the moon casting a silver glow over Grey Manor's silent grounds. Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant, prepared for the midnight meeting at the church. His mind alight with the clues that had brought him to this moment. The star-cut sapphire, found in the grandfather clock's hidden panel, illuminated by its secret lens. The rose-sealed letter demanding the return of Roger Gray's pendant. Return the pendant, or the sapphire is lost. Midnight, the church, and the wax smudge on the clock, tying Mrs. Beatrice Holt to the conspiracy. The threatening note, at 11:11. Your time ends. The rose-etched key, coarse gray thread, rose-etched button, pocket watch frozen at 11:11, oil-stained cloth, star gear, turpentine-scented charcoal. Cellar map, Gibbs's notebook, lockbox note, parchment will, brass plate, brass pendant, stable cloth scrap, and attic thud formed an intricate puzzle, with Roland Gibbs's confession and Mrs. Holt's partial admission pointing to a mastermind within the manor. The thud from the attic, heard last night, suggested a final search, and Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, ready to confront the sender of the rose-sealed letter and unmask the silent clock's final secret. Poirot dressed with meticulous care, selecting a black overcoat and a sapphire blue scarf, his crescent moon teepin gleaming like a beacon, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter to Felix, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, will, plate, pendant, stable cloth, and the new rose-sealed letter. The wax smudge and attic thud implicated someone. Close Mrs. Holt, Timothy, or Felix Ward, while Gibbs's detention left the mastermind free. Tonight, at the church, Poirot would face the sender, but first he would search the attic for the final clue. In the hall, the grandfather clock stood, its rose-carved case a silent sentinel, its hands still frozen at 11:11. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint trace of soot near the base. Not the charcoal or wax from before, but a gritty residue, as if from a chimney. Mon Dieu, he murmured, his mustache twitching. The attic calls, with its secrets of soot and shadow. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp despite the hour, her eyes bright with resolve. Monsieur Poirot, you're up late. The church meeting, do you think it's safe? Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished marble. Mademoiselle, the church holds the truth of the rose-sealed letter. But first, the attic, where a thud was heard. Have you noticed soot in the manor? Miss Lavinia frowned, her fingers tightening on her shawl. Soot? The chimneys were cleaned last month, but Timothy was up there yesterday, checking for leaks. Could it be? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur Timothy's presence is noted, mademoiselle. I will search the attic, then go to the church. Stay with Rose and lock your doors. Before he could ascend, Constable Burrows arrived, his face ruddy from the cold. Monsieur Poirot, Gibbs is secure at the station, but I found this in his cell. He held out a folded paper, its edge torn, bearing a sketch of a star-shaped lens with the note. The sapphire's light points north. Must have slipped from his satchel. Poirot's pulse quickened. Most excellent, Monsieur Burrows. The clock's lens points to the sapphire's hiding place, but this suggests another. Join me in the attic and the church. The attic stairs creaked under Poirot's careful steps, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. His lantern cast jagged shadows on trunks and cobwebbed beams. The soot smudge from the clock mirrored in patches near a chimney. A trunk. In the corner, its lock scratched, drew his eye. He opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with twine, each sealed with a rose emblem and a small brass tool, its tip stained with wax. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, lifting a letter. Its handwriting matched the rose-sealed threat, addressed to R.G., dated before Roger's death. The sapphire must stay hidden, or the family falls. The signature was not Gibbs, but someone closer. Burroughs whistled. Mrs. Holt. Maybe? She's been shifty. Poirot nodded, pocketing the letters and tool. Madame Holt's betrayal deepens, but these letters predate Gibbs. We go to the church. The churchyard was silent, its gravestones stark under moonlight. Poirot and Burroughs hid behind a yew tree, the clock tower striking midnight. A figure emerged tall, cloaked, a hat pulled low carrying a lantern that flickered like the attic's thud. As it neared the crypt gate, Poirot stepped forward, his voice a velvet blade. Mon ami, you are late. Hercule Poirot awaits. The figure froze, then lowered the hood, revealing Mrs. Holt, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. Monsieur Poirot, I came to meet Gibbs, to end this. Poirot held up the attic letters. Madame, these bear your initials. You wrote to Roger, warning him to hide the sapphire. You sent the rose-sealed threat, oui? Mrs. Holt's hands trembled, her voice breaking. Yes, I wrote the letters. Roger trusted me with the sapphire's secret, but I was in debt, desperate. I sold a fake, as I told you, but I never meant harm. Gibbs found me, said he'd expose me, unless I helped him scare Lavinia away. Poirot's mustache twitched. And the note in the clock? You placed it, to drive Mademoiselle Lavinia out? Mrs. Holt nodded, tears streaming. I stopped the clock, hid the note. I thought if Lavinia left, Gibbs would stop. I didn't know he'd come here tonight. Burroughs stepped forward, his voice gruff. You're under arrest, Mrs. Holt. Conspiracy and threats. Poirot raised a hand. Not yet, Monsieur Burroughs. Madame, where is the pendant Gibbs demanded? Mrs. Holt's voice was a whisper. I hid it in the attic, in the trunk. I took it from Roger's study after his death, to keep it from Gibbs. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, you have confessed, but the sapphire is safe. Return to the manor under Burroughs's watch. As Burroughs escorted Mrs. Holt away, Poirot searched the crypt gate, finding a dropped glove gray, coarse, like the garden thread, but with a faint scent of lavender, not oil. Curious, he murmured. Another hand, perhaps Timothy's. Back at the manor, dawn broke, the frost glittering. Poirot gathered the household in the parlor, the chandelier's light casting stark shadows. Miss Lavinia sat rigid, Felix. Ward's loop tucked away, Timothy's watch silent, and Rose's eyes wide with fear. Poirot held up the sapphire and attic letters. Mesdames et messieurs, the sapphire is found, and Mrs. Holt has confessed. She wrote the threatening note, stopped the clock, and met Gibbs to scare Mademoiselle Lavinia, all to hide her sale of a fake sapphire. But this glove, he raised. It suggests another. Monsieur Timothy, it smells of lavender, like your aunt's scent. You are in the attic, oui? Timothy paled, his voice low. I was looking for Father's notes to help Aunt Lavinia. I found the pendant in the attic, dropped the glove. I didn't know about Mrs. Holt. Felix leaned forward, his eyes on the sapphire. A lens in the clock? Brilliant. But I had no part in this. Rose's voice trembled. I saw Timothy in the attic, sir, but I didn't know about the glove. Miss Lavinia's eyes softened. Timothy, you kept this from me? Poirot's voice was firm. Monsieur Timothy, your silence aided Gibbs, but the sapphire is safe, and Madame Holt's confession closes one thread. After the gathering, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the library. Mademoiselle, the sapphire is yours, but the pendant's role remains. I must return to the attic to find its lock. Miss Lavinia nodded. Thank you, monsieur. Roger's legacy is safe, but I fear Timothy's secrecy. As Poirot ascended to the attic, a faint tick echoed from the clock below, not its full chime, but a single gear shift. He paused, his hand on the banister. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you stir, but Hercule Poirot is near." He closed the attic door, the glove and letters joining his clues. Mrs. Holt's confession had unmasked the threat's author, but Timothy's glove and the pendant's lock loomed. Tomorrow, the attic awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 13. The pendant's last lock. The dawn over St. Alban's broke with a brittle chill, the frost on Grey Manor's grounds glinting like a frozen web under a weak November sun. Hercule Poirot rose at 5, his mind a whirl of revelations. From the midnight church meeting, Mrs. Beatrice Holt's confession that she wrote the threatening note, "At 11:11 your time ends," to scare Miss Lavinia Gray, her admission of selling a fake sapphire, and the lavender-scented glove implicating Timothy Gray in the attic secrets. The star-cut sapphire, found in the grandfather clock's hidden panel, was safe, but the brass pendant's roll and the attic's thud suggested a final lock in Roger Gray's intricate puzzle. The rose-etched key, coarse gray thread, rose-etched, button, pocket watch frozen at 11:11, oil-stained cloth, star gear, turpentine-scented charcoal, cellar map, Gibbs's notebook, lockbox note, parchment will, brass plate, stable cloth scrap, rose-sealed letters, and attic letters formed a tapestry of clues, with Roland Gibbs detained and Mrs. Holt exposed, yet a mastermind lingered. The faint tick from the clock last night hinted at a stirring mechanism, and Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, ready to unlock the pendant's final secret. Poirot dressed with meticulous precision, choosing a tailored suit of deep burgundy, his crescent moon teepin gleaming, his cane a polished extension of his resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear, letter to Felix, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, will, plate, pendant, stable-cloth, rose-sealed letter, attic letters, and lavender glove. The soot smudge and Timothy's attic presence pointed to a hidden mechanism, perhaps tied to the pendant, while the rose-sealed letters suggested a deeper betrayal. Today, Poirot would search the attic for the pendant's lock and confront Timothy. Unmasking the final player dot in the hall, the grandfather clock stood silent, its rose-carved case a monument to Roger Gray's genius. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint ridge along the clock's side, barely perceptible, as if a panel had been sealed with wax. A trace of lavender lingered, matching the glove. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mustache twitching. "The clock hides one last secret, and Timothy knows it." Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp, her eyes shadowed with concern. "Monsieur Poirot, you're at the clock again. The sapphire is safe, but what of the pendant?" Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mademoiselle, the pendant is a key to Roger's final lock, hidden in the attic. Timothy's glove suggests he seeks it. I go there now, then question him." Miss Lavinia's fingers tightened on her shawl. "Timothy? He's been reckless, but not cruel. Could someone else be guiding him?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possible. Mademoiselle." The rose-sealed letters hint at another, but Timothy's silence speaks. "Stay with Rose, and lock your doors." Constable Burrows arrived, his face ruddy from the cold. "Monsieur Poirot, Gibbs is still locked up, but I found this near the manor gate." He held out a broken watch chain, its clasp etched with a rose, stained with soot. "Looks like it came from the attic." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Most excellent, Monsieur Burrows. This links to the clock's ridge. Join me in the attic." The attic stairs groaned under Poirot's careful steps, the air thick with dust and the scent of lavender. His lantern cast stark shadows on trunks and beams, the soot patches near the chimney more pronounced. The scratched trunk from last night stood open, but a smaller chest, tucked behind a rafter, caught his eye. Its lock was etched with a rose, matching the pendant's design. Poirot inserted the pendant, and a soft click revealed a compartment containing a folded parchment and a small brass lens, its edge engraved with a star. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, unfolding the parchment. In Roger's hand it read, "Lavinia, the sapphire is yours, but the lens guards the truth. The clock's final lock opens north at 11:11 with the pendant and lens." The lens was clear, its facets designed to focus light. Burroughs whistled. "Another lens?" Roger was a crafty one. Poirot nodded, pocketing the parchment and lens. "This completes the clock's mechanism. The pendant and lens will unlock the final secret." As they searched further, a creak came from the attic door. Poirot spun, lantern raised, to see Timothy. Gray, his face pale, his hands clutching a leather journal. "Monsieur Poirot, I came to explain." Poirot's voice was a velvet blade. "Monsieur Timothy, your glove was found, scented with lavender, and you were in the attic. This journal, what does it hide?" Timothy's voice trembled. "It's father's, found here yesterday. It mentions the pendant and a lens, hidden to protect the sapphire. I didn't tell you I wanted to find it for Aunt Lavinia, to prove." "Myself." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the cellar?" "You spoke of the clock, with Gibbs." Timothy flushed. "I met Gibbs once. Yes, in the cellar. He pressured me, said he'd ruin us if I didn't help. I told him nothing, I swear." Poirot took the journal, its pages detailing Roger's final design. A clock panel, opened by the pendant and lens, revealing a compartment north of the clock face. "Merci," he said. "Your truth is partial but useful. Come, we return to the clock." In the hall, Poirot gathered Miss Lavinia and Felix Ward, the clock looming behind them. He inserted the pendant into the ridge, then placed the lens in a slot near the numeral 11. A beam of morning light struck the lens, projecting a star onto the clock's top, where a hidden panel clicked open. Inside was a velvet case, empty but for a note. The sapphire was the key, but the truth is trust. "Forgive me, Lavinia," Miss Lavinia gasped. "Roger's final message, no more treasures?" Poirot nodded. "The sapphire was the prize, mademoiselle. And trust his gift. The empty case confirms it." Felix leaned forward, his eyes wide. "A lens and pendant lock? Roger's genius never ceases." Poirot turned to Timothy. "Monsieur, your journal led us here, but your silence aided Gibbs. Why hide it?" Timothy's shoulders slumped. "I was ashamed, monsieur. I thought I could fix father's mess." At luncheon, the household was subdued, the chandelier's light casting long shadows. Mrs. Holt, under Burroughs's watch, served silently, her confession heavy. Rose hovered, her eyes steady, while Felix toyed with his loupe. Poirot stood, holding the empty case. "Mesdames et messieurs, the clock's final lock is open, revealing Roger's trust in Mademoiselle Lavinia." Mrs. Holt's threats and Timothy's silence fueled the mystery, but Gibbs acted alone, hired by letters we must trace. Rose's voice was soft. "Monsieur, I saw a letter in Mrs. Holt's room, rose sealed, hidden in her sewing box." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Mademoiselle Rose, you are invaluable. Fetch it." Rose returned with a letter, its rose seal matching the others, addressed to E.H. "Ensure Lavinia leaves, or the truth comes out." No signature, but the hand was sharp, like Elton's in London. Miss Lavinia's eyes widened. "Another letter? Who sent it?" Poirot's voice was firm. "The sender is in London, mademoiselle. I return tomorrow to find them." As evening fell, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the parlor. "The sapphire is yours, and Roger's trust is clear, but the rose-sealed sender remains. I will unmask them. Miss Lavinia nodded. Thank you, monsieur. Roger's legacy is safe. As Poirot retired, a faint rustle came from the hall. Not the clock's tick, but lighter, like paper falling. He paused, his hand on his door. Mon ami, he murmured, you linger, but Hercule Poirot is near. He closed his door, the journal and letter joining his clues. The clock's final lock had revealed Roger's trust, but the rose-sealed mastermind loomed. Tomorrow, London awaited, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution. Chapter 14. The mastermind unmasked at the dawn over St. Alden's broke with a sharp clarity, the frost on Grey Manor's grounds sparkling like a fragile mosaic under a cold November sun. Hercule Poirot rose at 5, his mind a whirlwind of clues. From the clock's final lock, the empty velvet case, Roger Gray's note affirming trust in Miss Lavinia. The sapphire was the key, but the truth is trust, and the rose-sealed letter found in Mrs. Beatrice Holt's sewing box, hinting at a London-based mastermind. The threatening note? At 11:11 your time ends. The rose-edged key. Coarse gray thread. Rose-etched button. Pocket watch frozen at 11:11. Oil-stained cloth, star gear, turpentine-scented charcoal, cellar map, Gibbs's notebook, lockbox note. Parchment will, brass plate, brass pendant, stable cloth scrap, attic letters, lavender glove, and Roger's journal formed a complex puzzle, with Roland Gibbs detained, Mrs. Holt's confession secured, and Timothy Gray's partial truth exposed. The faint rustle in the hall last night, like paper falling, suggested a final move by the unseen sender, and Poirot's little gray cells thrummed, ready to unmask the mastermind in London. Poirot dressed with impeccable precision, selecting a tailored suit of slate blue, his crescent moon tepid gleaming, his cane a polished beacon of resolve. His valise held the clues: key, thread, button, watch, cloth, gear. Letter to Felix, ledger page, map, notebook, lockbox note, will, plate, pendant, stable cloth, rose-sealed letter, attic letters, lavender glove, and journal. The soot stained. Watch chain and the rose-sealed letter's sharp handwriting pointed to Elton's Timeworks in Clerkenwell, where the wax and stamp had been stolen. Today, Poirot would confront Elton again, trace the letter's sender, and resolve the mystery of the silent clock dot in the hall. The grandfather clock stood, its rose-carved case a testament to Roger Gray's genius, its hands still frozen it. 11:11. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass revealing a faint smear of ink near the clock's base, blue and fresh, as if a pen had leaked. The ink carried a faint scent of lavender, tying it to Timothy's glove. Mon Dieu, he murmured, his mustache twitching. The hall holds secrets, and the sender is near. Miss Lavinia Gray joined him, her high-collared dress crisp, her eyes bright with hope. Monsieur Poirot, you're off to London again? Will you find who sent that letter? Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished marble. Mademoiselle, the rose-sealed letter leads to Clerkenwell, where the truth awaits. A sapphire is yours, and Roger's trust is secure, but the mastermind must be unmasked. Have you seen ink stains in the manor? Miss Lavinia frowned, her fingers tightening on her shawl. Ink? Timothy was writing letters yesterday, in the study. Could he? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur Timothy's actions are noted, mademoiselle. I will question him on my return. For now, stay with Rose and lock your doors. Before he could depart, Rose appeared, her apron crisp, her eyes wide. Monsieur Poirot, I found this in the study, under Timothy's desk. She held out a crumpled envelope, rose-sealed, addressed E.H. Its ink blue and smudged. Poirot's pulse quickened as he opened it. Holt, keep silent, or the manor falls. No signature, but the hand matched the attic letters. Mademoiselle Rose, you are a treasure. This confirms the sender's presence. Stay vigilant. The train to London cut through the morning mist, its rhythm a counterpoint to Poirot's. Racing thoughts. The rose-sealed envelope, with its blue ink, tied Timothy to Mrs. Holt's conspiracy, but the sender's identity likely known to Elton remained elusive. In Clerkenwell, Poirot navigated the cobbled streets, the air alive with the tick of clocks, and entered Elton's Timeworks. Its rose and clock sign gleaming out. Mr. Elton stood behind the counter, his ink-stained fingers adjusting a chronometer, his eyes narrowing as Poirot approached. Monsieur Poirot again? What now? Poirot produced the new rose-sealed envelope. Monsieur Elton, this letter, found in Grey Manor, matches your stolen wax and stamp. It threatens Mrs. Holt, and its ink is fresh. Who took your seal? Elton's hands trembled, his voice low. I told you, a woman tall, stern bought wax, but the stamp was stolen later. I lied before, monsieur. It was Timothy Gray who took it, last month, when he visited for clock parts. He said it was for a family crest. Poirot's mustache twitched. Timothy Gray, you say? And you did not tell me? Elton flushed. He's Roger's son. I thought it harmless. But he asked about the sapphire, said it was his inheritance. I refused to help. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this? He held up the watch chain, its rose clasp soot-stained. Found near the manor, linked to the attic. Elton's face paled. That's Roger's. I saw it on Timothy last month. He said he found it in the manor. Merci, Poirot said, pocketing the envelope. You have clarified much. If Timothy returns, detain him. As Poirot left, a clatter echoed from the shop's back room. He darted through a curtain, finding a spilled ink bottle, blue and fresh, its scent matching the clock smear. A window was ajar, and a shadow-cloaked Hatlow vanished into the alley. Mon ami, Poirot murmured. You flee, but Hercule Poirot follows. Back at St. Alden's, dusk settled, the frost glowing under moonlight. Poirot returned to the manor, the ink-stained envelope heavy in his valise. In the hall, he confronted Timothy, who stood by the clock, his face pale, his watch silent. Monsieur Timothy, Poirot said, his voice a velvet blade. This envelope, found in the study, bears your ink and the rose seal stolen from Elton. You wrote to Mrs. Holt. We? You orchestrated the threat. Timothy's hands trembled, his voice breaking. I didn't mean harm, monsieur. I found father's journal, learned about the sapphire. I wanted it for Aunt Lavinia, to secure the manor. I used the seal to scare Mrs. Holt into silence. She was selling secrets to Gibbs. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the note in the clock? Your work? Timothy nodded, tears welling. I stopped the clock, placed the note. I thought if Aunt Lavinia left, I could find the sapphire without Gibbs interfering. I was wrong. Miss Lavinia, entering, gasped. Timothy, you threatened me? Timothy's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Aunt. I wanted to protect you. Poirot's voice was firm. Monsieur, your intentions were flawed, but your confession is truth. The sapphire is safe, and Gibbs is detained. Constable Burrows arrived, his face grim. Monsieur Poirot, I checked the attic again, found this. He held out a pen, its tip stained with blue ink, hidden in Timothy's trunk. Poirot nodded. The final piece. Monsieur Timothy, you will answer to the law, but your aunt is safe. At dinner, the household was silent, the chandeliers light, casting stark shadows. Mrs. Holt, under watch, served quietly, while Felix Ward's loup gleamed, his smile faint. Rose stood steady, her eyes clear. Poirot stood, holding the sapphire. Mesdames et messieurs, the mastermind is unmasked Timothy Gray, who wrote the rose-sealed letters and stopped the clock. The sapphire is Mademoiselle Lavinia's, and Roger's trust endures. Rose's voice was soft. Monsieur, I found one more thing in Timothy's room, a sketch of the clock's lens, hidden in a book. Poirot took the sketch, its lines matching Roger's journal. Merci, mademoiselle. Rose, you have sealed the truth. After dinner, Poirot met Miss Lavinia in the parlor. Mademoiselle, the mystery is nearly solved. Timothy's actions were misguided, but the sapphire is yours. One thread remains the cloaked figure in London. Miss Lavinia nodded. Thank you, monsieur. Roger's legacy is safe. As Poirot retired, a faint breeze stirred the hall. Not the clock's tick, but a window left ajar. He paused, his hand on his door. Mon ami, he murmured, you linger, but Hercule Poirot has won. He closed his door, the sketch in envelope joining his clues. Timothy's confession had unmasked the mastermind, but the London figure loomed. Tomorrow, the matter would rest, but for now, the mystery of the silent clock was one step closer to resolution.